I just wanted to welcome everyone today. My name is Sarah Briggs, and I am the Green Chemistry and Emerging Contaminants Program Manager for New York State P2I. I will also kind of be your event MC with my lovely teammate, Victoria Clip. Wave your hand. So we're just going to do some general, hey, 5 minutes here, welcomes here, whatever. If you have questions, please let us know. But in the interest of trying to catch us back up, I would like to get us started and welcome everyone and invite Roy Green and Joel Plosky to the stage for some remarks from P2I and RPI. So, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you. I got a response. It's great. I'm Roy Green. I'm director of the New York State Pollution Prevention Institute. At RIT, we work statewide with DEC support to help organizations reduce environmental impact through pollution prevention, sustainability, and green chemistry innovation. So I want to thank our partners, RPI, Beyond Benign, for helping make today's workshop possible. I also want to specifically recognize that the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, our funding partner, this continued support enables P2I to deliver pollution prevention, sustainability, and green chemistry assistance across New York State. For those who are not familiar with P2I, we're headquartered at RIT. We were established in 2008. We have about $4.35 million in annual funding, and we work across a number of programs. So obviously green chemistry is one of those programs, and the one we're here today for, but we also do sustainable manufacturing and process improvement, supply chain sustainability, green technology validation and support, environmental impact accounting, food waste diversion, and then community grants and grassroots empowerment. So that's who we are and what we do. We work through a partnership with RPI, Cornell University, Clarkson University, Binghamton University, and we work in collaboration with the New York Manufacturers Extension Partnership. Our mission is really straightforward. We want to make New York State more sustainable for businesses, workers, communities, and the environment and the economy. And we do that by working with companies, communities, schools, and partner organizations to reduce waste, improve resource efficiency, advance safer chemistry, and support practical implementation of sustainable solutions. So green chemistry is a natural fit for our mission because the best environmental solution is often the one designed in from the beginning and not after the fact when you're trying to deal with pollution when it's already created or chemicals when they're already used. So when safer chemicals, safer products, and safer processes are considered early, we can reduce risk to people, the environment, while creating opportunities for innovation and economic growth. That is why today's workshop is so important. It brings together industry professionals, K through 12 educators, higher education, faculty and staff, students, and technical experts in the same room. Advancing green chemistry requires more than good ideas. It requires education, applied research, workforce development, and real-world implementation for working, and all of us working together. So we're pleased to be part of this bridge. That's what we call it, bridging the gap. And we look forward to discussions today to continue to build a stronger connection between education, innovation, and practical green chemistry adoption across New York State. That being said, I want to guarantee that you will have a good time and you will learn something today. Money back guarantee. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joel.
Welcome, everybody, to RPI. My name is Joel Plosky. I am a professor in the Chemical and Biological Engineering Department and a member of P2I's Technical Advisory Committee. It's our privilege, really, today to host this green chemistry workshop, especially since it's one of the hottest days in the summer. And with all the wildfires, it seems like, perhaps if you look at the sun, maybe we're living on Mars or something. But RPI is, over 200 years old, and we have a long history, really, of incorporating elements of green chemistry into our programs and our curriculum. We're one of the founding members of the Pollution Prevention Institute. I think our institute started one of the first environmental programs in the country. And we've been transforming, at least from our point of view in the chemical engineering curriculum, to try and introduce many more elements of green chemistry into what we teach and how we teach our students to design chemical processes. Not only does it save energy and raw material, but it also helps us make those processes inherently safer so that we're not totally reliant on really sophisticated process control algorithms to keep the whole plants safe. We have an exciting and innovative program today that you'll all be a part of. Please don't forget about our clean room and our quantum computer tour. They're going to occur right after the breakout sessions at 12:15, and our student guides will be there at the breakout room to help guide you to the individual locations where the tours are. So I hope everybody has a good time today, and we learn a lot about green chemistry and how we can incorporate it, and that you can also learn a little bit about RPI too. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Roy and Joel. I am going to hop back for 2 seconds because, as Sherry pointed out, I forgot about these slides. So it's fine. We get there. I would just like to say thank you to all of these event organizers. As you can see, there were many people involved in making today happen. And so from the bottom of my heart, all of my planning friends who we've been meeting for, months now, we really appreciate everyone and also everyone who came today. So hope it's good. Now, I would like to invite our friends from Beyond Benign up to the stage. I believe Amy and John are starting this off. So they will do a welcome from our partner organization and set you up with the GCTLC.
All right. Welcome, everyone. It's really exciting to be here. We've been, our organization, Beyond Benign, we've been partners with with institutions in New York for a lot of years. So we've been working with the P2I, which are some of our favorite people to work with, way at the top. And then also at the DEC, so for a lot of years. And our work is focused around transforming chemistry education. So, us chemists typically aren't taught to understand anything about sustainability, toxicity, hazard, and how to bring that sort of understand that inherent hazard and bring that into our design as molecular designers. So we're trying to change that gap. And it's really interesting I love the title of this event is Bridging the Gap, Education and Innovation. And I think John and I both represent, the education piece and the innovation piece, which I'm going to let him speak to in a second. But our vision is really, can you imagine a world where you go to the store, you go to wherever, and and the burden is not on you to understand if something is more or less sustainable and how to make those choices at that level. Can you imagine if the molecular building blocks of the products that we used every day were safe and healthy for humans and the environment? I mean, that's our vision, right? And that's huge. And it almost sounds like science fiction. I think you always say, it's science fiction until it's science fact, right? Or it's science fiction first and then it becomes fact. So, and the work that we do is focused on education and that education piece, because if we keep training scientists, molecular designers, material scientists in the same way that we have been doing for decades, we're going to get the same end product, right? So our focus is on shifting that. And you're going to hear from a couple of our other teammates here in a second. But what I'm going to do is let John give you a bit of a welcome. But John is our co-founder. And John also is one of the founders of the field of green chemistry, wrote these really foundational 12 principles of green chemistry. He's a prolific innovator, has 300 or 400 patents at this point, several companies, many companies, and has worked with many companies to invent better and greener alternatives. And he's also an educator, has won some really fantastic awards and as an educator and also working in industry as well. So I'm going to let him do a bit of a welcome here.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Amy's my wife. She does that because now anything I say is just going to disappoint you. I recently Netflix released a documentary called The Plastic Detox. And I play a very small role. I'm in it for about 15 minutes. And essentially the general theme is very scary, and it warns people that there are, things in consumer products that can hurt you, that can impact human fertility, health, and things like that. And I'm very proud of what they do for green chemistry. There's a good introduction to what green chemistry is. But I step back and I look at the theme of the whole film. And it bothers me because it's saying the consumer has a responsibility for researching and knowing how to best protect themselves. And as a synthetic organic chemist, I feel that's a condemnation of the field of chemistry. That we're saying that it's not our responsibility to make safe products. It's the responsibility of consumers to pick the right products. That is just messed up at every level. But right now it is a reality that every year we graduate 450,000 undergraduates in chemistry globally. We graduate 125,000 master's degrees in chemistry globally. We graduate about 35,000 PhDs and doctoral degrees in chemistry globally. And the vast majority of these universities do not require any student to learn anything about how do you look at molecular structure and anticipate impact on human health and environment. How do you look at molecular structure and anticipate potential harm? Maybe 5% of the curriculum, if we're lucky, is if you're working with a known molecule, how do you look up what is known about a known molecule? But that's even a tiny, tiny bit if we're lucky. But if you're making something new, 0. And that's why green chemistry is so critical for the future, because if we don't change the way we teach the inventors, the definition of green chemistry, the technology that works better than an incumbent technology, costs better than an incumbent technology, and oh, by the way, happens to be better for human health and the environment. Who wouldn't want that? So the mistake the world is making is they think it's a crisis of desire. Right? That if we pass laws, if we create regulations, stuff, force companies to do the right thing, they'll do the right thing. But if they have hundreds, if not thousands of employees with degrees in chemistry, and not one of them have been trained on how to invent something that's not toxic, all the laws in the world aren't going to change that. And so this is a crisis of innovation. In 1990, 12% of invested R&D successfully made its way to commercial product and material science. Now in 2026, we're below 2%. All right. So at the very time we need to get new products on the market that are safe, we are failing to get new products to market, safe or not safe. And so if you accept my definition, better performance, better cost, and oh, by the way, better for human health and environment, what the world thinks, because perception is so much more powerful than reality. The perception is that green chemistry is a barrier. Green chemistry is going to make it harder to get a thing to market. And I laugh, because it's not. The barriers to getting a product to market are tough. Incumbency has an enormous force. But green chemistry is an accelerant to get past those hurdles, not an additional roadblock. I'm just a normal person. I have a tiny, tiny group of people, all right? Maybe 20 people. And in the last 15 years, we have filed 387 patents. We have worked with 120 multinationals getting products to market and have spun out 11 companies based on these inventions. Not because we're some geniuses, but because we use green chemistry. So as the thousands and thousands of workforce people are saying, green chemistry, these tree huggers, it's just going to make it more difficult, I can't help but laugh. All right. And so that's why this meeting and this organization, what the New York State Pollution Prevention Institute, is so critical, because getting a product to market is hard. Most companies fail. That is evolution. And so I am not going to spend one moment of my time trying to convince a company, oh, you should do this. They'll be out of business soon enough and a new company will come and replace them. This is about IQ. All right. And you need the desire to want this. I want to play the violin. Okay. You can pass a law. All John Warners must play the violin. Okay. People can picket my house and say, John Warner doesn't play the violin. That's bad. All right. But if I don't have a teacher teaching me how to play the violin, I'm not going to play the violin. And so until we change education and we realize that getting a paper in a high impact factor journal and having that line on your resume that 95% of academic papers are never read once, if that paper is full of toxic materials that hurt the environment, is that what that student wants to hang their fame on for the future? I think the next generation gets it. Okay, and so thank you, organizers of this conference, Beyond Benign, New York State Pollution Prevention Institute, and RPI for hosting this, because I can't think of anything more important for the future. So let's just succeed. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. Always inspiring to hear from. And there's a breakout session this afternoon where it's sort of ask me anything. So you get a chance to just, go in and chat with him and pick his brain a bit, which should be a nice opportunity. So that's coming. So a couple of my colleagues here that have come along here is Michelle Ernst Modera is our K-12 Community Engagement Manager, has done a lot of work behind the scenes. Thank you so much, Michelle. And and I'm going to invite Dr. Omar Villanueva to come on up. Omar is our Chief Program Officer, has been with us for about a little over a year and a half now and jumped right in, but came to us with about 10 years of academic experience and also as a department chair at a college in outside of Atlanta. So if you are here as an academic too and would like to also pick his brain a bit around sort of tips and tricks of bringing green chemistry to your department, he's also a really fantastic resource there. But I'm going to let Omar introduce, I guess I'm just going to hand it over to you. I'm just going to hand it over to
So Beyond Benign has a lot of programs. They're very active. Particularly the higher ed programming is very active right now. This is a movement of green chemistry, as John mentioned. Like, people want to do this. The universities want to do this. The community wants to do this. And so in 2023, Beyond Benign launched this platform called the Green Chemistry Teaching and Learning Community. So the GCTLC, we always say the green chemistry community likes some TLC. It's a free open access community online platform for the community. It was designed by the community. It took many years of just getting feedback from the community to where we are right now. But this is just a space where people can go in and access resources, access curriculum, access activities if you're in K-12, access forums, discussions. And our newly launched initiative has been groups. And so I'll talk about groups in just a second. But we have over 4,500 registered users. So these are real people. These are not robots. I know we're living in a world with AI and lots of robots, things messing up websites. But we have over 120 countries being represented on this platform. So that tells you that the community really is pushing for green chemistry and they are looking for resources. We have over 400 curriculum resources published. So these are publications, these are activities, these are lab experiments, these are, as safety resources that we have for the community. Most of those, over 50% of those, have been contributed by people like yourself who are sitting in this room, educators, K-12 teachers, community members, industry, people who have actually been able to say, hey, I have this that I made. I want to share it with the world. We have over 18,000 downloads, and they keep growing. And over 230,000 site visits since we launched the platform. So check it out. I really invite you to check it out. There's a lot to see. It's a little overwhelming sometimes because you're like, oh my gosh, I want to do it all. But How can I try one thing at a time? And so in order to have people talking to each other a little bit more, the GCTLC launched last year what we call groups. In this space, we have private groups. You can get a group. Everybody gets a group. In these groups, you can do things like what we're doing for today's workshop, where we can have, I don't know if you can see my mouse cursor, but you can have discussions inside a group. You can have uploading of resources in a group. You can have private spaces where you and maybe 2 or 3 or 200 other community members want to collaborate in a space that's allocated just for you guys. And so in today's workshop, a lot of the stuff that you'll see today, the slides, the presentations, discussions, if you want to continue that conversation after today and you're like, oh, I wish I would have asked John Warder this question, I'm going to tag him. So John will get an email saying somebody tagged them from this workshop. They have a question. He can go in and reply to those comments or questions. But I invite you to check it out. It doesn't have to be right now, but check it out as soon as you're able to. And this is where we're going to have any repository files from today's session. Everything will be posted there, essentially. All right. Well, we look forward to talking to you throughout the day. Thank you so much.
All right. And now we're really excited to kick off our morning keynote. I'm super excited to introduce Jennifer Durand. She's Kenvue's Global Head of Sustainability with oversight of the consumer health company's Healthy Lives mission. Over the course of her career, Jennifer has worked to transform complex global issues into opportunities to have positive impact on people on the planet. Jennifer serves on the board of directors at Change Chemistry, and she specializes in product sustainability and has led teams responsible for green chemistry, ingredient stewardship and resiliency, responsible sourcing, as well as value chain impacts. She's cultivated robust external relationships with retailers, NGOs, consultancies, academics, and trade associations. She has several patents and publications and a postgraduate degree in sustainability leadership from Cambridge University and a master's of science in chemistry from Carnegie Mellon University, which was, and we were graduate students at the same time. So it was, so I'm not going to say how old we are. So I think I'm probably older than you too, by the way, for the record. But Carnegie Mellon was another one of these hubs and hotspots of green chemistry. So it's really exciting to see your career and also to welcome you up here. So thank you, Jennifer.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be here. As Amy mentioned, it does take me back to some of my academic roots. Thank you. I will put my hand up and say I am one of those chemists who graduated from undergraduate with a degree in chemistry with absolutely no training in toxicology whatsoever. I did have an introduction to it at Carnegie Mellon, where I was for graduate school, studying with Terry Collins, where I got to learn and hear from many of the great godfathers, as I call them, in my work of green chemistry. And I'm really excited to be here today with two of my colleagues, Dr. Jennifer Sachs and Chris Aiello, to share with you what we're doing at Kenvue on sustainable innovation and how we tie green chemistry into that. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. First, a little bit of context, though, because you might not know who Kenvue is. So therefore, before I talk about what we do, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who Kenvue is. So we're a large consumer healthcare company. We operate in over 165 countries around the world, and we spun out about 3 years ago from Johnson & Johnson Consumer Health. So you may not have heard of us, but you've certainly heard of all of our brands, ranging from, well, you can see them on the screen there, but from Tylenol, Listerine, Neutrogena, Aveeno. But basically, it's a lot of stuff and pills in bottles that people either put in their bodies or on their bodies. So that's what we make a lot of, right? So I'll just start there. And that is not the comms approved intro to Kenvue, I will tell you. So you're getting a special inside peek as to what we do. But what I do at Kenvue is I am our head of sustainability. So I am responsible for our Healthy Lives mission. And Kenvue's business, the reason to exist, the raison d'etre, is all about making people healthier and live better, look better, right? Because when you look better, you feel better, you live better, you tend to thrive. So that's kind of their mission. And we recognize that you can't have healthy people without a healthy planet. I don't know about you guys, but I like to drink clean water and breathe clean air. So, we don't want to be hypocritical, and we really want to take a look at what we're doing, our own operations impacts the decisions we're making. And so we break that down into our Healthy Lives mission. And there's 3 pillars: people, planet, and products. So pretty straightforward, but I'm going to talk to you today specifically about sustainable innovation and our products. So all of these things are really important to our business. I like to level set there with sustainability because it doesn't, we have large footprints. We do have emissions to air, to water. People buy our products and then they throw away the wrapping. A lot of what we do ends up in the water. I don't know about you, but if you ever used a Band-Aid and then you see one and you're like, oh, the dirty Band-Aid, these things, every Band-Aid we've ever made is still with us somewhere on planet Earth, right? Some have gone to the moon, but I think they came back as well with us. So this just getting people to think about our product portfolio footprint in a different way. So we really elevate everything to public health and products is really what it's about. Even climate change. If you want to talk to me later about how climate change being an environmental problem is the biggest misnomer ever in the history, well, one of them probably in history of the world, but that's a people problem. It's an environmental problem. So thinking about it through the lens of public health is something we're really invested in. So getting into sustainable innovation and green chemistry. What is the problem that we're trying to solve? The problem I'm trying to solve is that the formulators would come up with a great product, test the stability, it works like they want it to, it smells like they want it to, and they would bring it to us, sustainability experts, and say, tell me how I did. What are the impacts of this? But it's already all done and they're set. So we're, driving this car and trying to measure through the rear view. If you look at all the sustainability reporting we do, it's in arrears, right? It's last year's data and stuff. So we're driving this car and the business is moving full speed ahead and we're in the car, but we're reporting looking through the rear view. That is the problem we're trying to solve. And this is a solution that we've developed to do so. We call it the Sustainable Innovation Profiler. Essentially, it is a real-time diagnostic tool that we have deployed to our entire product development organization and all of our packaging engineers that allows them to assess in real time the sustainability attributes of the products that they're making. We do a ton of benchmarking. We benchmark cost, performance, efficacy, stability, and now they can measure sustainability in real time. It's not once you're done, I'll go off and, conduct a life cycle analysis in a month and bring you a 30-page report with a spider plot that we have to interpret. So the beauty of this tool is in the simplicity and the ability to transform complex data into really easy to use, actionable insights. So we are going to talk about, we have 4 pillars that we're going to go through: the carbon impact of our products, how we're advancing green chemistry, and how we look at championing packaging circularity. So first, though, really important to ground yourself in business. There's this age-old adage, but you can't manage what you can't measure, right? Otherwise, we're talking about feelings and emotion and qualitative. No, we need data. So what we've done and how we are measuring, and we've actually published recently, because to the point that transparency drives innovation, we've published a 30-page methodology on how we do this and more details on the science, and the authors of that are sitting in the room with us here today. But essentially, if you were to almost picture this like a strategy board game, this is the scoring rubric. And so across these 4 dimensions, product environmental footprint, product carbon footprint, green chemistry, and packaging, you have to improve without going down in another to qualify as a more sustainable innovation, because we're trying to avoid these trade-offs too that we have to make and not celebrate, celebrate perhaps a non-plastic innovation that's moved into aluminum, because the carbon footprint of that doesn't help us address all of what we're trying to do. So you're probably familiar, but the first 2 metrics on product environmental footprint and product carbon footprint really aren't our science. This is the EU's, this is standard life cycle analysis science, where there's across common life cycle stages, there's 16 environmental endpoints that we assess. I think where the secret sauce in our tool actually comes on the green chemistry metric. And so I don't have to present you with the principles, the 12 principles of green chemistry, but you will see the 3 highlighted. That is really where
considering our product portfolio lens, we can have the biggest impact on our product. So across designing safer chemicals, using renewable feedstocks, and designing for degradation, the way that we have sort of coded that into improvements we're trying to quantifiably drive in our product portfolio are transformed into these 3 metrics. So starting on the right side of the screen, talking about the origin of the material. It's kind of the simplest for people to conceptualize. Is it petrochemical in nature, or is it from a renewable feedstock? Check. The middle bucket is around this idea of a watch list. And there's these emerging concerns in chemicals, because to John's earlier point, innovation takes time. We have product development timelines, 3 to 5 years is kind of the standard time. So a lot can change in that process. And what I constantly hear from some of my product development colleagues is, I didn't know there was a problem with that. We didn't know the EU was going to restrict that. We didn't know this was a thing. And so this watch list helps us drive the car, looking through the front view a bit to say, well, this you've picked is a candidate HVAC. So sorry, a candidate SVHC. So perhaps that's not the best choice. Are there other ones versus just, continuing to formulate transparently with blinders on? So the third and final one I want to talk about is, we call it Gaia, and it was something Johnson & Johnson Consumer Health was actually doing very early on, I'll say in the mid-teens, looking at aquatic toxicity. Because when you make shampoos and personal care body washes, a lot of that just immediately goes down the drain. So some of the thought leadership at that time was, we really need to be thinking about the aquatic toxicity of our product. And we wanted to sort of retain that legacy and think about what is that impact at end of life. Especially, we make a lot of over-the-counter pharmaceutical products. And I don't know if you guys just saw, but Europe added ibuprofen and diclofenac to priority pollutants in wastewater recently. So there are things happening across spectrum of geographies in this space where we're very concerned about what we're putting into the aquatic environment. The fourth and final score is around packaging circularity. So I don't know if you've heard some of the noise around plastics recently, but this idea about, how do we use less virgin? How do we use more recycled content? What's the material efficiency of what we're putting in? Or are we lightweighting where we can? And really, can we just switch out into recycled FSC cardboard, which we're doing across some of our brands? Nicorette and Zyrtec are getting out of those, I'll say, hideous clamshell. Marketing doesn't like me using that term, but it's like a cardboard back, half plastic thing into just recycled cardboard. So we're making that switch, saving a lot of plastic. It actually saves us a little bit of money, and it's selling really well. So to John's point earlier, it's not that sustainability always costs more. And it's sometimes some of these little things that, like, it's not rocket science, I like to say sometimes. So I will take you through how the tool works in action. And we like to be transparent. So we'll go through 2 case studies of how does it actually work. And these are the actual results readout. We totally redefined. And actually, funny story, when I was interviewing for this job, OGX is one of the brands that was just a symbol of it. And I was like, oh, I don't recognize that one. And it wasn't until someone showed me the bottle, I was like, oh, yes, I know that brand. Okay. Right. But so we totally redid the packaging, and we totally redid the essentially the juice in the bottle, the surfactant system. And the reason this product, we were looking to assess it at all, is we had all these consumer complaints. They couldn't get all of it out. And it doesn't stand up very well upside down because of the rounded, distinct cap that marketing insists is really core to you knowing what this product is. So we wanted to totally look at that, totally redesign the packaging, 100% PCR content, redesign the surfactant system so we're able to have a lower carbon footprint, and also improve the formula resiliency when you take out a persistent ingredient. We also improve the Yuka score. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Yuka app. No, it's really big in Europe, but anyway, so we improved our score. It's like a consumer rating app for products. So this is an example of us meeting our sustainable innovation commitments. We're using less plastic, and we've made our consumers happier because they can get all of the stuff out of the bottle, essentially. So that's sort of a win-win. here's an example of a recent product we've launched where we didn't qualify. And this is where legal is like, do you really need to talk about this one? And I'm like, yes, I do. Actually, we're being transparent because this is some of the beauty in the tool, I think, is actually the action-oriented insight. So actually, the formula is great. They've made some great improvements to that, and they've taken out, again, dealing with some of these persistent chemistries. We were discussing some of them at the bar last night. So that's been good improvements. But what isn't great about the packaging is that it has one of the pump, right? And consumers love the pump. We get that format, but it has a metal spring in it, which isn't good for recycling. And so it doesn't qualify because it's not as good as we can make it. We don't think it meets the threshold. So we kicked it out and identified an innovation opportunity. And actually happy to say Aveeno across Europe just launched 100% plastic pumps. So they just all goes into the recycling. So we are starting to test and learn some of these innovations where we can. But this Neutrogena product does not qualify. So really, I'll just wrap quickly to say, we're not resting on our laurels. What are we continuing to do about this? Science that stays ahead is really important. It's changing so fast. And there's a lot of regulations coming at us. To John's point, people talk about, I thought, environmental stuff was dissolving and there really isn't any of those pressures coming anymore. We're like, well, maybe at the federal level in the United States, it's cooled off a little bit, but we have a ton of state activity, including in New York State. We see things happening across Europe, and there's a lot of activity in Latin America as well. So while we have some current administration headwinds, things change and shift, and we think the business case is really clear. So we're also working on thinking about claimable outcomes. We talk about products being like born badged, or if we're talking to Amazon, there's like a climate pledge friendly badge that you can purchase better products or rated products there. So understanding how that works. And then of course, looking at AI powered performance, because this is good at measuring what is, but how do we think about predictability? Because we have hundreds of years of clinicals now not hundreds of years, hundreds of clinical studies on 100+ years of Listerine research. How can we combine all of these data sets in a way humans just either haven't been taught to do or haven't yet had the capability and capacity to do? So thinking about how we use AI to empower some of that. So with that, I think I have a slide at the end here, but it's just about Healthy Lives Mission. Our tagline is kind of everyday care in action, because some of this is routine, right? We talk about, we make sunscreen. Skin cancer, melanoma, is one of the most preventable types of cancer, and it's rising. I think it's number 3 in the death rate in the United States at the moment. And so, but those routines have to be built in, right? And you have to be using products that aren't goopy and white and make you feel gross, because the best sunscreen is the one you'll wear, actually, and wear repeatedly. So that is a sort of whistle-stop tour of how at Kenvue we're taking green chemistry. And I was reflecting as you guys were talking about education. I feel like I'm an educator as well. I'm just educating my fellow product designers and packaging engineers as well internally. So I think with that, I'm handing back to Amy and looking forward to the rest of the day and engaging discussions. So thank you. Your question. Great. I love questions.
Hey. Thank you for your question, for your presentation. That was very interesting, especially for an academic chemist who doesn't think about how to interface with companies yet. So the question I had was, whenever you're talking about having these conversations about green chemistry with your, designers and package engineers, can you give us an idea of like what those types of conversations are like, or sort of the background information that sort of people need to start thinking about to educate themselves whenever they're already in the professional environment?
Sure. And thank you for your question. And please let me know if my response doesn't quite nail it. I think we can pick up in the break. But initially, we're met with a little bit of resistance. They don't see that as their job, really. That's your job to know about sustainability. My job is to know how to make the best moisturizing, retinol-containing, et cetera, cream that's stable. Like, I'm not worried about that. And so really helping them think about total product and putting consumers at the heart of what we're doing I think is really important. Now, specifically about green chemistry, though, I think where we've done really good is like translating the complex, and sustainability can mean so many things to so many people. So that's where I think the power of the tool, essentially they build a virtual product model with the ingredients they're using and a bill of materials effectively, and the packaging they're using. And then we've run the calculations behind the scenes. So they get a score. So they start to understand the green chemistry impacts, or start to see, oh, my favorite, ingredient that makes things feel luxurious and slippery actually has some environmental challenges associated with it. So it's more of creating that awareness as they go through their day-to-day across the field, I would say, is where we've had the success. But there is that initial resistance and some of the help, from leadership effectively in the business. My boss, the chief scientific officer, saying, this is your job. And so we've embedded it in the product development process. It's not a separate standalone thing. There are these like 5 stage gates you go through, from feasibility to design, development, commercialization, and then launch. And so it's kind of like a funnel where it starts wide. It's an open sandbox when you first start to play, but as you go through the process, it narrows. And by the end, you have to be taking from our like global specification system on how we launch products to really sort of bring it all together. So you need those scores in the process. So I would say the other key point I've learned over the past several decades in industry is that sustainability, it doesn't win as a standalone piece or an afterthought that you're measuring. You have to embed it into the process. And therefore, that requires translation into product design and development terms, and vice versa. You have to talk to toxicologists and packaging engineers. And it's that engagement is really where the rubber starts to hit the road. And they see it then as their job. Yes, please.
Yeah. So when Jen talked about Gaia as a piece of the green chemistry metric, I helped develop that in 2009, and so we've been using it for a long time. So we've had a long time to test what works with product developers, what they can understand. And what we learned from all of those years of feedback was that a layered approach of sort of delivering that complex information lands the best. So the top layer, what you saw, at least for the Sustainable Innovation Profiler, is very, very simple. It looks like gauges. The Gaia piece in there is a score, 0 to 100. So it's but behind it, there's toxicity information, half-life in the environment. There's a fugacity model to tell you where it will move in the environment. There is information about bioaccumulation potential. All of that is boiled down into a score of 0 to 100. And what we find is that depending on the individual who's developing the product, they're happy with the simplest version, but there are some who want to know, why is that? I want to understand that better. And so when we have, I think, what do we have? 400 to 600 product developers.
Over 600.
Over 600 product developers. And so there's a giant range, and it's really the interest level and understanding, or really the interest level of the individual. And so as part of that software that you saw, they don't only get that top level of information. There's a double click and they can get more, and then another double click and they can get more. And in it, there's some education, and there was Chris, who's here with us as well, has been a big part of that. So a big effort to educate the entire product development community to know, like, how are we doing this? What is the rigor behind it? What is the science behind it? And one of the big challenges is also that the data are being developed, new data out in the world are being developed all the time. And it can be frustrating for the product developers to have a score, and then for us a year later to go do a data update to say, we're going to use the best science when we make these decisions.
but now their score in that sustainable innovation profiler changes. So it is critical that the product developers have the information about what we're doing behind the scenes so that they can trust it, and they can understand a little bit about what's under the hood. But not all of them want to do that.
Mm. Thank you. Great build.
Hi. So mine's more about thinking out loud process and being asked some answers like me not bridging the gap, higher bid, A12 in industry. And I know LIT has a huge major of packaging. It's a huge major which I know of all the students of mine are seeking and the packaging. And my question was, in your experience, do you find that there's been a link of you as people evaluating the consumerism or the production of products, that there's been an integration of green chemistry into these packaging major courses, or is it that they're going to entirely on design and not on sustainability or any of those issues that concerns?
So I have to say, I joke that I know enough about packaging to be dangerous but not useful with packaging. So I will say that I don't think I've seen green chemistry or green engineering per se. We've seen a lot of lightweighting. We've seen a lot of material design, new materials, right? Press pulp and paper kind of things, but not so much green chemistry or green engineering principles coming in.
Great. Alex.
Hi, I'm Catherine Walker with the Center for Sustainable Materials Management at ESF. First of all, this is thrilling, and thank you so much for the presentation. Learned a lot. This is a complicated question, but very briefly, we have EPR for paper and packaging that has rolled out in 7 states nationally. And as a company, this is a challenging thing to meet those regulations, obviously, that are different in each state. If you could briefly potentially tell legislators in New York State what EPR paper and packaging needed to have based on your experience as someone that is working for a corporate and national company, what would you advise? There's a quick one. 30 seconds, you got it. EPR, so what to do? Data. You need data to do. EPR, or extended producer responsibility, often refer to plastic. It's this concept that the polluter pays. So in relation to plastic or packaging, companies self-report, and what you put out, you pay fees associated with. And we're very familiar with that. We have over 40 jurisdictions globally where we have EPR fines and fees in the non-insignificant millions of dollars. And it's not harmonized anywhere, not even across the EU bloc of countries. So it is this very rich tapestry of different data requirements and specifications. But actually what we're struggling with the most is getting data. So getting all of that data in a workable format. We're doing quite a big piece of work internally to organize ourselves accordingly and be able to self-report. And the interesting thing we found actually through that data cleanup is one of our countries was significantly over-reporting. So they actually got a credit back because you had these people who didn't know what they were doing, assuming everything weighed this, and then we're not really sure. So let's round up significantly. And we were paying, so we got significant money back once we actually got the right data associated with it. But yeah, that's my 30-second blurb on EPR.
Hi, hello, I'm Dinah Farrington. Thank you for a fascinating, excellent presentation. This is not really a question going to bench chemistry or chemistry. It is related to environmental things. Just opening it up for you to talk a little. All right, in this room, I'm sure there's people who have noticed at grocery stores, at Whole Foods, other places, there's an employee category. Amazon hires lots of them, running around doing the shopping for people. And many, many consumers will spend as much as, I don't know if they actually save any shopping time. Online, they'll pick out exactly what they want, and then the system sends that to a little Apple phone, which the iPhone is carried by the shopper, these people get a very low wage on the whole, who runs around and shops for you. Has anybody ever begun to deal with, well, if they're picking for the customer, what does the packaging matter? Packaging is out there to grab you visually and say, oh, I'm going to buy this today. Maybe I don't need it till next month. But these people are in their private areas doing their shopping without seeing the items. So just opening it up for you to talk.
I can absolutely confirm that the rise of beyond sort of the click and collect or delivery grocery shopping, the rise of e-commerce has changed marketing, has changed packaging. So we see that across the board because, to your point, this idea that you needed the biggest, flashiest packaging ever so that you stand out on shelf, if actually I'm buying on Amazon, what I want is to be returned higher in the search results, right? I want to be on that first page and I want to have a lot of high ratings. So and maybe the picture of the thing it doesn't look right online. So I can confirm to you that it has changed considerably. Yeah, it's changed the game. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you very much for coming to speak with us today. I'm fascinated by the wonder behind the world that you're showing us as to how the industry practices are actually laid out and decisions are being made. To wit about that, I wanted to ask about this philosophy of phasing out. You mentioned the metaphor of looking behind you and driving the car forward and how much we re-innovate with the future in mind. I also imagine that might also entail a great deal of phasing out of older practices and older machinery and devices that led to the current state of production and manufacturing. As a company that succeeded in making those type of changes in that philosophy of phasing out, what would you recommend as advice? Kind of like I sense the first question, what would you recommend as advice for that type of building at scale while recycling what once was the way we did things? That's also part of the process. So I was curious about your insights for that.
Yes, we do quite a bit of, we call it remediation. So either removing an ingredient that we no longer wish to use and replacing it with something else, or adjusting the packaging, or quite as you alluded to, the actual way we're making it, right? So if I've changed the packaging significantly such that I need a new packaging mold, then that has capital expenditure associated with it. So I'd say actually what we found, and I think where I would encourage people, there's kind of two approaches, and we sort of are working both ends transparently, where you can get the brand folks really excited about making claims and being the commercial opportunity that exists, and perhaps some third-party certifications to back up what we're saying. But we also get the operations folks really excited because those molds don't have an infinite lifetime. Somewhere, and I know who, but in our Kenvue organization, it's an Excel list, but it's when every mold will expire. It's a list of dates, right? So it's not like you need to go out and change the world and switch everything overnight, but when you need to make a better choice, make a better choice. And you can't buy a new mold without lightweighting that bottle. Are kind of two ways to go at it. So we're taking both approaches. So I don't have one right silver bullet answer for you, but because there is a lot of complexity associated. But I will tell you that often when you go from the operational side and take that approach of making a better decision when you come to that point, there isn't often quite as much pushback versus if I get the marketing folks excited, then it's an MPD. I'm creating complexity in the marketplace because it's not everything. It's one or two things. And so if you're in a cash-constrained environment, which most of us are operating in these days, often the operational efficiencies and making the better choice as you go, in addition to some of those breakthrough innovations and how do you totally change the game, are what we're trying to attack. So we have to do both is the answer.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Yeah,
this has been fantastic. And what fantastic questions. So thank you. That's a wonderful start. So I think we're on to the panel. So I'm going to invite Omar back up here.
All right. So we're going to get started with our next session. I hope you are inspired and, you're ready to change the world. And we're about to get inspired again for the next hour or so. So I'm going to invite the following individuals whose pictures are on the screen to join me here. Grab a seat, get comfortable, bring your coffee, bring water, anything you need, so we can get this conversation started. So our panelists ready? Are you comfortable? Yes, you're not intimidated by the audience just yet? Yeah. Not yet.
Look, Bradley, too.
Well, hopefully in this short 1 hour session, we'll get to hear the perspectives of these amazing individuals doing this work in their work for years. And hopefully we'll get inspired by seeing the things that you want to leave the audience with walking out of this workshop and session. So we have Jennifer, Julian, Catherine, Jose, and Irina here on the stage. I'm going to try to moderate as best as I can, but I'm going to let you all have the opportunity to give your perspective to some of these questions. But I'm going to challenge you to give you about 2 minutes and just tell the audience who you are, where you come from, anything that you might want to share, and then we'll launch the questions. So we might start on that end with Jennifer again.
Well, I think I just introduced myself and where I came from, so I will probably recycle my 2 minutes to help the agenda move forward. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Hi, everyone. Julian Silverman, coming to you from New York City. I am an assistant professor at the Rochester Institute of Technology, which, yes, is a strange place for a chemist, but it's a really wonderful place to be. We have no science majors, and yet every one of our students takes a science class. And so we have the challenge in a single semester of teaching the scientific method, sustainability, and all of these different ideas. Importantly, our students go on to make the garments, accessories, jewelry, right, all these kinds of cosmetic products and consumer products that we use every day. And so I would argue that we have as big of an impact as the designers and the chemists on the kind of front end. And so that's our ultimate challenge. It is a lot of fun. They are very creative, of course. With that said, I always say that sustainability is really rooted in the basic science, right? So they need to understand that to really be successful in making meaningful changes and decisions. I would argue I am here in part, not only because I love Beyond Benign and the work that they do, but I do mentor high school students as part of their authentic science or high school research programs. So in the greater like Westchester and New York, area, there are a wide variety of high schools with dedicated science research programs. So these are classes students take where they're actually doing multi-year projects. And I work as a mentor, mostly online. I'll bring them in from time to time to do work with some of our instruments. This was something that I had started doing in high school, and then the program kind of fell apart. So it's a real wonder to be able to work with them, and also a great challenge, things that we'll talk about later today in our panel. But yeah, there's a real hunger and interest for these high schoolers to address sustainability from different aspects. And excited to, learn from industry and other experts here.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine Walker. I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Sustainable Materials Management. It's a mouthful, CSMM, at SUNY ESF. And I'll dive into a little bit more about what we do. But it just, first of all, is such a thrill to be here with our amazing colleagues at P2I and Beyond Benign, which have been working with for years, just to be here, and with the amazing John Warner. I don't know where he went, but I'm such a fangirl. Never met, but thank you, John, for all you do. And it's hard sitting on a panel like this where I'm like, oh, wait, we're supposed to connect. It's nice to meet you. I have 14 questions for you, Julian. So I'll try not to get into moderator mode, but really quick storytelling, really quick. I was a high schooler that did not know what they were going to do. And so when we think about education and how critical it is, I knew I wanted to save the planet. I didn't know how to do that. That was before a sustainability major was even, I'm aging myself. And I went to St. Lawrence University in the North Country. And the first class I took, the first literally book I read was Our Stolen Future by Theo Colburn. And it changed my entire perspective, and was kind of the landing and base there of looking at chemicals in a different way. And I found a windy path to where I got to where I am here. But pollution prevention and reducing toxics has been a thread forever. So I just really important, one, obviously the education piece, but what we do at the center is really to think about, and our charge is really to reimagine waste for New York State. So like P2I, we get our funding from New York State, and we're administered by the DEC. And our goal is really to help the state meet their goals in terms of reducing waste. So they have a very aggressive 85% recycling rate, which is great. But as John said, all the policy in the world and all of the
challenges that we have in creating these materials is nothing without education. So we do a ton in outreach and engagement and meeting people where they're at with these decisions. So how do we take this great research and the great information that we have and translate that to all of our different partners, whether that's within the university system, whether that's a private company, whether that's a university partner, a municipal government partner. And so simply, we advise and support policy, but we also work, and I'll be able to share more on working with green procurement decisions for the government agencies, looking at recycling markets, and then again, like I said, that outreach and education piece. That was probably over 2 minutes, but oh, yeah. Sorry.
Good morning. My name is Irina Spiri, and I work for New York Creates. And New York Creates is owner and operator of the largest national semiconductor R&D, which is located here in Albany. I'm a sustainability engineering manager. So my main job at my role is to establish and then expand sustainability program for New York Creates. So sustainability mission has 3 distinct pillars for New York Creates. The first one, we are building dedicated test beds, which we can use to validate, evaluate, and develop more sustainable processes, equipment, or materials for semiconductor industry. The second one is we are focusing on embedding sustainability into our operations, which are quite extensive to support clean room operations on our site. And the third one is focused on a collaboration, building the relationship and structuring a focused collaboration with academia, businesses, and government agency to drive sustainability efforts. So we Research and Development Center, but we have an access to the industry-relevant 300 millimeter tools and waste streams. So we believe we position very well to bridge this gap from lab to fab, where we can generate relevant data for more sustainable materials. So I'm very happy to be here and to be a part of this panel. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Jose Santos. I'm a high school teacher at Packer Collegiate Institute in Brooklyn. I was here actually last year, in the first workshop, and I had tons of questions, tons of interesting ideas. I teach 10th grade chemistry. I'm lucky to have also the ability to teach organic chemistry and what my school calls inorganic chemistry, which is really general chemistry too. So I get to work with the older kids as well. One of the things that I saw last year was that, and this is actually something that I am grateful for to Omar. He said, start small, right? Because I wanted to revamp the curriculum. It's like, no, that's not the way to do it. And I actually, started incorporating the principles of green chemistry and the UN Sustainable Development Goals into my curriculum through readings, and in every lab assignment that we had, we always stop to analyze how can we do this one experiment better. And I'm happy to say my students grew immensely with the idea that science can be made better, right, if we put some effort into it. So I'm here again, not so much as an expert, right, but I am still curious. I'm still have with tons of questions, but I'm hoping to also give a little bit of a view of what happened in my classroom this past year.
All right, thank you, panelists. As you can see, we have a really broad range of expertise and titles here in the panelists. You could be next year sitting here, right? You could be doing that next year. So, if you're interested, talk to us at the end. So we love hearing the talk this morning from Jennifer. I'm going to pick on you next. Her talk was amazing, first of all, and it really allowed us to see and hear what an actual company, like a real person that works at a real company, right? I used to have students that were like, oh, no, you're just You're just saying that we need this for industry, but nobody really uses this in industry. So in your company, you showed us how green chemistry shows up in packaging and new things, new products, new materials. Is there anything that you would want to share with the audience for those educators? And I think I see students in the back as well who might want to end up one day working at a company who values sustainability in green chemistry, such as yours. For example, like what kind of skill sets should they be preparing right now and looking into the future instead of, 10 years from now and then saying, oh, I'm going to go and work for a company like that, but I have no experience in any of these skills. Anything that you might recommend?
Yes, thank you. So I think that one of the most underrated skill sets, and I'm going to say that there are plenty of people in this room more qualified to talk about what needs to change with green chemistry education than I am, but I will say one of the biggest skill sets that I think is not taught appropriately in school is communication and simplification. That translation step, knowing that I'm not trying to impress you with how much I know that you don't know, because you've lost the CEO, you've lost the commercial leaders. And it very quickly, I was like, I'm not trying to confuse the people I'm trying to convince. And so being able to put on the hat of that communication hat and say, how do I need to adjust my message and simplify? And I will thank Jennifer for the build earlier, the layers of the onion. And some people are okay with the page, some people want to double click, some people are, in the weeds all the way down. We talked a little bit about the telescope and the microscope. We have both, right? You have to be able to zoom out to the big picture as well as zoom in and see the detail. And so I would just close with reiterating the importance of communication, because we teach people how to write these scientific publications that everyone reads and super dry, right? So that if you see them come in and struggle with basic, kind of PowerPoint and presentation skills. So I would just urge the importance of communication and presentation. Yes.
Hey, so I'm going to challenge you, Jennifer, on a different question that's not on the script. So let's say I am a senior student about to graduate, and I've learned all the chemistry and I know how to communicate. Now, how do I get a job at a company like this? And I unfortunately I didn't get any training on toxicology or sustainability or green chemistry. Are there any things that like you would say, this is what I would need in my team? Here are the things that I want you to learn, specifically to green chemistry. Any kind of training that you're looking for, in specific, if you have anything in mind.
That's interesting. So how do I embed that? How do I translate that? So it's really the sense of curiosity and seeking to understand and communication. It is that translation back, right? So understanding it well enough to explain it. I had a boss once that used to say, I don't understand, so you didn't explain that very well. Well, and couples even know that, right? It was like, don't have the knowledge to understand it. That's not the right response. So it that sounds right. That's not that. But yeah, I think it's that curiosity. And so it's also back to like, if students are out there coming to a job or senior, go out and meet people. People hire people. So hiring managers, internships. That's honestly, I think if I look back at my career, it's personal relationships previously established that then you get a foot into a door for an opportunity. But it is those person-to-person connections is what I would tell that senior.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move on to Irina next, if you don't mind. So you come from a background, you mentioned a little bit about your background and where you work right now. Can you tell us a little bit about what green chemistry, or in terms of sustainability in green chemistry, what does that mean on the floor? Like if you were to explain to the audience, this is what we do, this is why we care about green chemistry.
Yes.
And why it's important.
I mentioned a little bit that one of the pillars and focus of our work is to develop test beds for different semiconductor processes. So I can talk about two projects which we are actively working on. The first one is focused on finding alternative gas chemistries for edge applications. And gases which are used in the electric edge process have high GWP. So finding low GWP alternative is important for semiconductor industry. So how are we doing that? We are building the system. We've dedicated 300 millimeter, so the large scale industrial chamber, and we will be evaluating our alternative chemistry with our current process of record chemistry. And we will be using our test vehicle, so it's established semiconductor flow for which we have a historical data. So what we'll do first, we'll develop the process with new chemistry. We will compare, we'll collect the data for the edge performance. Then we'll collect the data and compare electrical performance, which is relevant to semiconductor industry. And we also setting up the capability where we can make online emissions measurement as well. So upon the completion, we will have the full data package, which addresses key aspects of performance for alternative versus process of record chemistry. And this system will be specifically dedicated for sustainability studies for any future collaboration or interest to do evaluation of different types of chemistry. The second project, which we are actively driving, is looking at the PFAS-free photoresist alternative. So the approach, in a sense, similar. We are using industrial processes. We're utilizing our established flow for comparison for the baseline. And we just finished phase 1 evaluation where we looked from the blank silicon wafer and we had promising results. So now we go into the second phase where we're looking at the full stack to have that again, final data comparison, which we will use for communication of performance of alternative versus process of record. So this is the two examples which we are actively driving in Your Creates. There are a lot of other ideas which are in our pipeline for the future, such as potential alternative CMP slurry and other alternative chemistries for different semiconductor processes.
Okay, that's awesome. It seems like you have a lot going on, right?
It's a lot going on.
A lot going on. In those programs, is there one in specific that you might that resonates with you right now, at least in terms of you wish more educators and students understood?
I think for sustainability touches every function within the organization, right? So I think understanding complexity and different perspective of different functions, technology, operations, EHS on a particular chemistry substitution is necessary for successful transition, right? So supply chain looks at the logistics of the material, resilience, and the cost. Operations looks at reliability. EHS looks at safety, environmental, and compliance. Technology looks how it performs on a semiconductor. So I think having ability to see multiple perspective and just have a general appreciation of complexity, which will, I think, will be very important for successful transition to newer chemistry.
Okay, sounds like systems thinking, right? That's part of sustainability in green chemistry. Thank you. I'm going to move on to Catherine next. You've seen both sides of this bridge, I guess, with your experience. From that vantage point, what do you see is the biggest challenge in moving New York from pollution prevention principles on paper to genuine sustainable materials management on the ground?
Oh boy, let me just do that in 2 minutes. Real briefly, I do think that there's some themes here which you're hearing, which again, we have complex systems, right? So the solution lies in understanding the system. So whether you're a student emerging with a very specified, incredible academic background, walking into and being able to communicate to a leader of well, why does that matter in 30 seconds? The communication piece is really huge. But also being able to then understand how that research is connected to this wider system. So when you're about to apply that and move into a potential company and want to be hired by that company, why does your background matter? What skills are you going to bring to that? I think I just died here. I can talk there we go. So I think the major challenge, and John kicked us off this morning, which I think he just summarized it right, very, very incredibly, in that we do not have an innovation problem. We don't have an innovation problem in America. We don't have an innovation problem in New York State. What we have is a challenge of getting these solutions into a very complex system. And I think what we have done really well in New York State is to create both funding opportunities for organizations like P2I and the center and academic expertise. And we've created a lot of systems, like, for example, with green procurement, and an idea that the New York State government institutions have an incredible buying power. So when we're talking about supply and demand to get these products into use, there's a great arm of government can do this, right? So the challenge, I think, is, and one of the many challenges is, how do we actually get them to buy, which is a huge communication challenge. It's a huge process question. It's a huge system challenge to make sure that we're doing that well and efficiently and following procedures and policies. But it's also about, I think, a disconnect between the innovator and the manufacturer. It might be down a road that they went 5 years down that road and might have learned a little bit about the policy requirements 3 years later, had those two folks been out of silo and communicating. So I think the earlier we can connect the folks that are driving and developing these policies and creating those systems with the researchers and these emerging technologies, I think we still have a lot to go right there. That's a very quick synopsis to something that is very complicated, but doing that, I think, not to toot our own horns, but I think the type of centers that we're developing, where you are the intersection between emerging policy, implementation in the private sector, and research, is a solution. So I think I answered that question.
Thank you. You're saving the world now.
Trying, but we all are here. And again, I think the challenge again is, like very quick, the other challenge, of course, is the financial piece of that. So, getting the financial backing, who is paying for this, it's always about the money, whether we like it or not. We're in a capitalist society. Sustainability requires, the fact that we are economically going to be viable. So how do we get this funding to entrepreneurs, but also to the folks doing this critical research within green chemistry and that are innovating? So, and education and engagement also costs money. Meeting people where they're at is not cheap, and doing it well is also not cheap.
Absolutely. Thank you. Moving on to Julian next. So as you guys can see, we're starting in industry, moving our way down in trying to close in the gap here. So, Julian, you really are, in my opinion, I think you sit at a unique intersection: chemistry, materials, textiles, design, right? I never thought about being a faculty at a place that talks about design. And you've done a lot of curriculum development and curriculum massaging, right? Because you have expertise in that. So, what's an innovation in green chemistry from that corner of the world, from where you are, that more people in this room should know about? And where's the curriculum and pedagogy still catching up with that science or innovation?
Yes, a wonderful question, especially because it, enters your homes with regards to consumer products, especially in the middle of the summer. I think a lot of us see. I will admit that it was in this past year that I started becoming a relatively daily sunscreen user. And you may know that there is a new ingredient coming to the United States, right, recently approved, that has been used for many, many years in the EU and other countries. And it's a really exciting teaching moment, because my students are actually way down on the top of these things that are. So I've actually put that for inspiration for, consumer products, cosmetics, and things like that. So that's where I draw a lot of my inspiration for, curriculum materials. But, the question you have is, why wasn't this approved? Why is this a better EV absorber? Those type of scientific questions. And so what I love is that at the kind of consumer level, right, these regulations and product developments inside of the curiosity, I think that I'm fortunate to have with my students. And I know, in traditional sciences, we have this as well. And so then from there, at the teacher level, it's like, how do I actually do this? And I love the idea of the layers. We borrow that for some of our, science this year. I would kind of translate to different audiences. But that is also kind of really what I focus on. As much as we're teaching science and they need to know what Beer's law, for example, I realized that really I'm teaching them science communication, especially for artists and designers. And so my goal is not to have that switch majors, so that, of course, is a secret goal of mine. It's more so to have them feel comfortable walking down the hall when they are, advertising and marketing and branding people at a big company, and feel comfortable talking with R&D, reading an LCA, even if it's a couple pages. And so, I have not only read translation, it's kind of where we are at the moment. There's all these really niche groups in the world who have hyper-focused interests and might need to collaborate and work across them. But we, also have instant access to everything on demand. So it's talking questions. And so, yeah, in that sense, I think that on the education side, part of it is kind of staying abreast, the sashing, trying to change so quickly. The basics that on mental science, question one doesn't change that often, except for the addition of the next topics. The other theme that I'm seeing kind of come out, and because of an hour address explicitly, is systems thinking, which is also, I think, how we're, like science dancing in a class, but that's what we're teaching. Is the idea of what is this ingredient, how does this make a product, how does that work with requirements, how does that impact the environment? And so I think the challenge is in the single semester, I don't get to teach all of them. I'm being like it's the same thing, but they do need to learn some basics, right, about causes and effect and boundaries, all these different ideas. Pretty traditional in environmental science, like, more common these days in chemistry, and yet increasingly relevant. Yeah.
Thank you, Julian. A follow-up question: are your students wanting to learn about that in terms of like what happens to this piece of clothing eventually at the end of its lifetime? I know they have to, learn about Beer's law and the curriculum and just the basics of general chemistry, but like, are they also really, this is a new generation that you're probably teaching right now, do they have that passion of like, I want to learn, I want to know what happens to this piece of clothing once it's at its end?
So I would say, they wrote in that toxicology class, which is really focused on the artists in our school, right? Is the pigment and paint values in stage to be inhaling the breathing first. Don't be having some work better. But I had a student come up to me again in the semester, and he, wonderful, I think he was a freshman, very early in his studies, he said, my summer project is I'm going to get rid of all of my clothes and to make all of my clothes from scratch. Now, of course, that's an incredibly idealistic goal. And, without trying to temper expectations, I said, as opposing to before, small changes, one thing at a time. It goes about the whole acid and more. But with that said, that's the curiosity. That's the kind of, hunger, as I call it, that I'm excited to see. And so, I gave him goals. I said, start with an outfit, start with a single pair of pants. But that was full of spirit. And I had this idea of, he didn't know what he was wearing, right? He didn't know the fibers. He didn't understand the process in which it was made, and he wanted to have that understanding of, process design and all of that. So that's, the wonder beacon as bigger since you can, help usher them along the way. At instance, make them work or watch YouTube, but that doesn't mean they really appreciate it necessarily. And so that's what I think, we're really here to do is voice, and make sure that they don't, they're on a little bit close for the results.
Well, they're lucky to have you, right, to guide them. Thank you, Julian. I'm going to move on to Jose next. And so Jose, I don't know if you caught that, he teaches organic chemistry to sophomore high school students. I know you're probably like, ooh, that's hard, right? But in my opinion, I'm like, they are lucky to be hearing these things, right? Yeah. And so I really appreciate that you bring that into the classroom. Hearing all of these innovations that we've heard today and everything else that's going on in the world, what do you think is the biggest gap between those innovations, research industry, and bringing that into your classrooms, for example, in terms of like what you have, what's accessible to you to bring in an already crowded lesson plan curriculum? What is the biggest gap?
Yeah, thank you. I have already, my brain is already on overload just hearing the other panelists talk. And I think there are two things that we're lacking. For one is that translational piece. I think that a lot of times educators in high schools see green chemistry or anything that has to do with sustainability as a vinegar and baking soda experiment, right? And it's so much more than that. And what we're lacking is, I think, a lot of the information that comes from the actual innovation that happens in the industry for students to be exposed to that. Yulian was talking also about the curiosity. In my classes, the capstone project that I gave the students, it was a free project. You choose anything that you like, any of the topics that we've seen this year, and talk about how it relates green chemistry, the sustainable development goals, and talk about it for 5 minutes. And I was amazed on how students, there was a Formula One enthusiast that look at fuels in racing. There was a baseball player that looked at the materials that they use for bats, balls, and all of that. The other baseball player that I had in my class talk about turf. We had one of the girls, one of my advisees, that talk about anything that she puts on her face, right? Like makeup and all the wonderful things that they use. And that was, in the reflection, they talk about how they were happy that they were able to take something that they know, that they use, that they live for, and study it and see what is it that it is made up of. So I think that's where, sometimes we're lost. I think what we're lacking is that pipeline that goes from the industry and even at the university level where research is happening, and then connect that to what the students are exposed to in the high school. Because otherwise it feels like, and again, my students love science, right? They do. But chemistry is a requirement for them, right? And this is true for a lot of the students in the state. And so right now, it feels very abstract. It feels very factual. I need to know these facts. I need to be able to talk about it, and I need to be able to solve problems, right? But I know that they want to solve the kind of problems that we're talking about here. And so how do we, link that? How do we make that happen? That's, I think, my biggest question.
Okay, thank you. I am now going to ask a couple of, the panelists to just give us 60 seconds. Okay, I'm not going to time you, but just 60 seconds. What is one practical step that schools, universities, state programs, industry partners, consider yourself in there too? What's one thing that you, in your opinion, these partners could take in the next year to better prepare students for green chemistry realities that they're going to encounter either in industry, at your organization, or in higher ed?
I can go first. I think internships and co-ops are very valuable for students. I think first, students will have an opportunity to gain real-world experience and start having exposure to reality of complexity, how organizations approach different problems. Also, having these internships and co-ops possibly in adjacent areas, so students will have an opportunity to see the problem possibly from the different perspective, also I think will be very valuable for students.
Yeah, I just continuing to expand what we're doing both at SUNY ESF, so Environmental Science and Forestry, SUNY University in Syracuse, It's really easy when we're talking about students. It's so easy to see their excitement. It's such a core quality of ESF students that they're so curious and want to solve real world problems. But to expand that and showcase, continuing to bring them out into the field, to whether it be the private sector or work with government, we want to expand those programs to not only continue to educate the students, but the other thing is I always laughing about this is that I don't think I'll ever leave an academic situation, because I gain so much personally from being around students. The questions that they ask drive me and fuel me and have me thinking about things that I would not think about. And I think for all of us, it's about that. I've had a lot of moments where students will ask a question. I'll be like, well, we can't do that in my head, but that is the problem, right? Why can't we do this thing? So I think encouraging that curiosity across those sectors and expanding programs like that. And then we don't do enough yet in the K through 12 world, but then connecting those students and those providers with the younger folks in the high school, chemistry classes, and encouraging those sustainability questions to the younger generation. I'm sitting here, Omar, I'm just wishing that I had you as my chemistry teacher, because I was lost as a sophomore or junior, whenever I was. So I think in continuing that and expanding it at the K through 12 level is critical. That was more than 60 seconds. I could keep going, but I won't.
Yeah, and I think that also, we know that a state like New York is heavy in the K through 12 on standardized tests, right? So I do have an issue with that, but I think that's for a different, discussion. But I think that there should be green chemistry principles, sustainability should be in the curriculum more present. Right? I'm not talking about revamping the whole thing next year, right? But start exposing students to this, start having them think about it. Should be one of the things that, must happen.
I can speak about one of the programs we have at Kennedy was called Access to STEM, because solely we find, underrepresented and most women, namely in the STEM community. And so we do work with the K-12. We partner with the Liberty Science Center and Junior Achievement on Science Outreach, as well as the university sponsor. And so thinking about the university getting those programs in for a lot of times, so our leaders, we'll have these days and we'll have these students and then they stop, I never thought of myself working like this on brands and products or doing what you do as an engineer. So it is like some of that, just I could make any more co-ops and internships and getting out. And I would say the other characteristic that I would encourage students today to kind of develop as they launch, particularly into a corporate world, is a bit of grit. So Angela Duckworth wrote a book called Grit. I encourage everyone to read it, but we find these sticky stuff at full and they're going to change the world. And I remember that feeling like that. And then it gets to corporate America and it's like, okay, this is how it works. And you kind of go through this deflation. So finding those kind of places where you can get and understanding that perhaps there are complicated systems of that place and you're not wanting to come into the industry and change your organization overnight. But it's with time. You're sort of steering a tanker, right? So we just keep slowly.
Yeah. And to that point, one of the things we have to be better at in our industry across the board is celebrating the small wins. We were at an event last night, and one of the things that we forget is that we get a thing done, whether it's a policy or a simple new greens procurement specification. I'm looking at Pam right now. So we get this one thing and we don't even pause to celebrate that this thing is now complete. We just move on to the next thing, and we need to be able to celebrate those wins within this industry for sure.
So just to technology and one of the things I think that are increasingly important, we have talked about AI at all, which is wonderful. There's our open access resources. So, any and reliable information online and whatever format that is, honestly, GCT will steal every resource of that. But I like to use a lot of safety sheets in my classes. Number one, they come from fantastic companies that have data. Number two, they actually go from chemistry to the environment between the physical chemical properties and the environmental systems students had endless questions about what is this say it's susceptible to be cancer causing? What does that mean? What is testing all of this? And so basic stuff like that, which falls, I mean, just should be given anybody, or considering actually kind of all the things we're talking about here and great connections between industry and, I'll just kind of sector.
Can I then actually, I have a soapbox so that people who are not IT might have better questions. But one of the other things I think we should do a better job of educating students about is risk versus hazard. We spend a lot of time talking about risk versus hazard. We spend a lot of time in industry trying to control risk and minimize risk, when in reality, if you take the hazard down, you don't have to worry as much about the risk. So a simple story, I don't know, just very quickly, is like an example of how to do that in a history product. And this is where I say translation engagement, but sort of like bringing it down to something that is tangible to that makes a difference in their life. It's not streaming. Spray, aerosol, sunscreens. And there are a couple different aerosol propellant species. Some of them have astronomical global warming potential. I think the agency like over 100, 150, I don't even know. Very good. And then she was like, propane, like LPG. But that's the warm to around 4, so not over 100. It's under 3 for animal, right? And it's a gas output. So I think future generations using it to empty it into doesn't make a lot of sense. Or things to that. Or being used to compressed air, which I can pull. But it's those type of decisions of controlling that risk versus the hazard, because then it is safer for the consumer. It doesn't cost as much shit. I don't have to have a list of trends because I'm storing huge tanks of these very flammable mixes around my employees. So there are benefits if they're framed like that. But getting them to see it in those lights, and then that they can make different choices, because that is something that's legal.
So thank you. Yeah, this is great to hear. When I was a faculty member, I would always want to do more, and I'm like, I want my students to get exposed to more things. So I really love the fact that we have people like these panelists that are willing to share their thoughts, their perspectives, that are approachable too, right? Because oftentimes we in academia sometimes feel like, oh no, I can't talk to industry. I'm not allowed to. They're not approachable. They live in a different world, but they actually do want to help. And so they're really open. They're open, at least from what I know. Now you guys are open to talking to educators and helping out. So it's 10:42. We have about 18 more minutes in this session. And you're like, oh my gosh, I got to go and do something else. But are there any questions from the audience? I want to give the audience a chance to also ask maybe either in general or maybe one or two panelists that you're really eager to ask a question to. And if we don't get to your question, they'll be around afterwards as well. I'm sure they'll be happy to chat. Okay.
Hey, thanks. It was amazing to hear you all talk. So I know there was a focus of industry and education at the school level. So I am in academia in the college level, like a postdoc here at RPI. And I feel that's totally different from both the corners. Okay, so there are two extremes, and academia and a university is right in the middle. So a green chemistry for industry is not a green chemistry for a lab who's doing a green chemistry research in a university. So we focus on something totally different. Like, let's say, I don't want to use solvent, and so that you don't have to discard the solvent. You don't have to do the recycling part. But hearing you talk, that kind of green chemistry is not what majorly industries focus. So how do you think we can connect this gap? We operate on totally different mindset that this is what green chemistry is. But then when we hear you talk, it's totally different from what we see or what we do in the lab. So how can we connect that?
But I'd like to connect that bridge for you, because it's not totally different. It's just a little bit, I talk more about applied green chemistry, I feel. Not maybe the pure green chemistry that you are doing is allowed. But if your goal is to reduce solvent, then I would urge you to think about common chemical processes that suppliers are using, where if you can invent a new process or a different way, different mechanistic route to arrive at the same product, you can actually sell that into like a BASF, and Eastman, a big chemical company that then will commercialize that and want to start using it. And you will reduce solvent. So then I'll buy it. And it'll be great because it won't have trace amounts of benzene, for example, or, you know, a solvent in it. So it is connected. I think it's just being able to see the connections, right, in the sky.
Yeah, so also basically, when you research, when we talk about SG, someone scaling up our methods, it's not about how can this process be adapted. Whereas all scaling up whatever we are doing to, you know, kind of get industry can, you know, use industry components because they are going to find the capabilities. It's always answering such questions. But like how we talk now, how do we incorporate it? How do we know what are the methods that industries are looking for? That, you know, you are not always trying to the chief for fatigue, and you're not always trying or how great is it mistakes. It's always how more patent it's always the same and in this generation. So we are not beyond we are not aware of and person of okay, you know, we are aware of what our needs and our feeling relaxed. Yes, yeah.
Something just very quickly. One of the things that you can just like most startups, you start to collaborate with industry, and this is a Kansas with large economical was to read patent literature. So obviously journal articles are, you know, you read them every day. It's challenging for a postdoc in science and engineering to parse, and right, you're not stealing ideas from patents and recreating them, but seeing what kind of chemicals are used, seeing how claims are written, and also seeing what's valuable and patented often is a great place to start on my end.
Yeah. And you nailed exactly what I said the challenge is, right? Is this disconnect, right? And so for manufacturers and these companies that are emerging that have these problems with their solvents, right? How do you connect the dots? And for you, I would say just continuing, obviously, to expand, doing the research, but also going to professional conferences that are not just about research, but connect manufacturers in that industry. So if you know, again, I don't know your specific line of work, but like looking at where this is translatable in industry and finding those places and building those opportunities to talk to the private sector. But it's also on the government side, something that we in our centers need to start continuing to bridge that gap, to bring those two things together, because to your point, it is absolutely challenging in a lab. It is not, and yes, you need to scale up for sure, but how do you make those decisions if you don't exactly know what you're going to be scaling to? So, yeah, I would say professional conferences, but also this is the challenge, I think, from our work to continue to provide those opportunities for researchers.
And I'll add the industry perspective. I know large multinationals, actually, I'd encourage you, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Reckitt Benckiser, Kenvue hasn't specifically done this, but they actually articulate some innovation challenges. You know, we want low global warming potential propellants that I don't need to shake. So there are film formers and sunscreens that are microplastics that I would not like to use. So a lot of these innovation challenges are articulated. If you're looking in the right spot for that.
Absolutely. And be creative about that. I can talk to, so we have some research that's happening at SUNY SF, and so we're looking at difficult to recycle fibrous materials. We're using those and actually getting creative about using that material for other things in the lab. And there's a certain company that produces and serves a lot of coffee out of a cup, that when that cup goes into the waste stream, it is not recyclable. And so that industry was looking at broadly around how do we make this cup purely recyclable, but you still need to make sure that hot liquid in that cup is not going to leak. It's still, and that's PE. It used to, as you all know in this room, lots of PFAS. Now the PFAS is reduced, but there's still a lining that needs to be functional. And that company in that industry did a broad look at all of the researchers that were looking, that could potentially have alternatives. And that gave our our lab, right, an opportunity to say like, okay, we need to design for this. They're still working out some kinks, but those are the opportunities. And there's a large, as Jennifer said, there's opportunity on the private sector. You just got to get creative and really look at those opportunities. So, yes.
Okay. Thank you, panelists. And I know we have one more question, but just to add to your comment, Beyond the Nine has also a monthly webinar called Green Chemistry Connections. And we are starting to we've heard things like that from the community, and we're starting to bring in more industry folks, more research into our webinars, because I know sometimes it's not always easy to go to every conference, right? And so we try to bring those opportunities free, open access as possible to the community. So that way people like you can hear about challenges that they are seeing in industry, and then you can say, okay, I think I'm starting to become more aware of things. So, okay, there's a question back there. Yes.
Yeah, as a curious person, molecules are very small, so you can't really see them, but you can see the results of them. A couple real quick questions. So, feedstock, right? I read somewhere like ammonia is basically created, and every molecule we have in our body from food has been created through a process. Basically, it's not naturally occurring. So, first question would be, are there naturally occurring chemicals that are not green? And the second is, what are the 500-pound greenhouse gorillas, like ammonia, CO2? What is your molecule that you would want to mitigate somehow?
I'll start because this is an important slide in every class I teach, which is that just because something is natural doesn't mean it's safe, right? There are natural venoms and toxins that will kill you in an instant. With that said, from a sustainability point of view, generally things that are natural fit into cycles and are going to be considered better for the environment and us. With that said, synthetic things can also be benign, right? Synthetic polymers can be non-toxic. They can also form microplastics, which then, bioaccumulate. So unfortunately, you don't always know if something's good or bad, just if it's natural or synthetic, yet you can get a good sense as to whether it might be good for the environment at large.
I think that's a really good build. And I think you're right, molecules are small. And in the space we operate in, there's a lot of chemophobia that exists, a lot of chemophobia. I think some of my marketing colleagues would love to say chemical free on some of our products. And I'm not joking when I say that. And I have a thing where I talk about, we have a lot of products that have dihydrogen monoxide in them, and that's responsible for a lot of deaths every year. And you guys are laughing because you know what I'm talking about. It's water it's the most environmentally benign substance on Earth. I'm made of 70+% of it. The Earth is covered. You guys get the gist, but I can't have a cup of it in my lungs because exposure matters. And so, but that's detailed, right? And I just want the headline of, but you guys laughed at that joke, but I have marketing colleagues who have recoiled in horror about, what do you mean we're selling baby products that are, guys, hold on, let me finish the story. But I think that we need to be very careful not to demonize and continue that. So we're trying to think about how we myth bust and bump, but yeah, we have a whole host of chemicals. We've talked about PFAS being problematic. That's problematic for everyone in the industry. We make sunscreen. So UV filters are obviously very important to us. We make a lot of over-the-counter medicines. So active pharmaceutical ingredients are very important to us. But I'd say the sort of from a climate change perspective, actually it's like methane that we need to be concerned about from all the things I've been reading.
I would like to add to your second questions about the chemicals, which we would like to remove. For semiconductor industry, one of the key contributors to overall greenhouse gas emissions, it's gases which are used in a process like dielectric etch process, which it's HFCs, with global warming potential, some of them above 17,000. So that's the project, what we are trying to do to find low GWP alternative. The interesting here is because these gases are so high GWP, they're so stable. That's why they have such a high GWP potential. Alternatives, they are less stable. So here becomes the questions of safety and toxicity and finding out what's the balancing act for sustainability and safety. And then,
Yes. Anyone else? Anyone else wants to add? Okay. Well, one last question. I think we have time for one question. Yeah.
I just want to look ahead and ask a lot of stuff you've been talking about delves into the procedure. What is the best procedure? But I think that probably the biggest thing left is what the process I'm trying to achieve. So, when your question about salt, what is going to achieve a salt rather than which salt I need to use? What, the process leads to the procedure. Right now, I'll go back to my history in environmental chemistry and lecture. Extract. You got to extract the soil. Each case that's used about dichloride, noxious chemical. No reason to go ahead and do that except establishing the procedure back in the 80s. Fixate. What am I doing? People have listened all of us chemicals to shrink us in. So we're going to multitude extract. Why something was being done with carbon dioxide. So these things can be insane if you recognize the process is I want to get to analog rather than the EPA requires you must follow the procedure.
Yeah.
So I in talking about systems thinking, I think that's probably where all of this needs to go is towards better system of evaluating lessons rather than what's the next step.
I think that's something we built. So I mentioned during my talk about putting the consumer first, and that's exactly right because, the old adage is the consumer doesn't want a drill, they need a hole in the wall. And so very akin to products that we make, if you only have a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. So if you think every shampoo needs to be looped in a bottle with a pump, but starting back to the consumer's not asking for that. They just want clean hair. So start from there on what's the benefit that we're delivering and work back.
It's a great example. So we have, not surprisingly, talked a lot about the green chemistry principles today, or, in context. I always remind my students that's the bow and arrow, right? But the target are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals or whatever their targets or goals you have. And so I always begin there, remind us that it's about clean water, it's about industry innovation, whatever your target may be. And then the way we reach those is through these principles that we're discussing, right? So it's journey and destination, and you, of course, need to look at both.
We're not anything to add. I could say, but
I just want to add, and perhaps I will not be answering your questions directly, but something that I've been thinking about, here in the panel is about how do we get our kids, right, to start thinking about these. I mentioned before, chemistry can be very abstract, but if we were to work or expose our kids to actual data, actual trends and patterns, they can start thinking about, what can we achieve as a generation, right? What can I achieve as a scientist? But also keeping in mind that a lot of our students are not going to be scientists. They're going to be CEOs. They're going to be in finance. They're going to be in education, right? So what's their part? What's the role, right, that they have for inspiring others, right? And so that comes with knowledge. If they don't know, they can't do it. So I think that's key. And that's what I was talking about, a pipeline earlier, right? To expose our students to what's actually happening in the industry, right? And what their vision is for the future. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I just build off. Sorry, I'm deep into the shampoo and clean hair. I'm really going deep here. But to your initial question too is, I think, that a lot of that comes down to consumer behavior and changing the behavior, right? So, we want clean hair, but I also want a product that's affordable and it needs to clean it well. But I've always purchased the same product that my mom bought for me 10 years ago, right? Or something. And so there's the
behavior change aspect, one, that you need the consumer to be able to say, I could try this new thing that's going to wash my hair well, it's affordable, and it's environmentally good for the planet. That's a challenge in its own. But to go back to the process of like, if you're scaling this up, it's not as simple as just changing right? Like you have to have the demand there to then create a new process within a government system, right? So those things have to be working together, and it's not, again, the solution may be available, but until the pressure is applied from both and this is the challenge with packaging, right? Like this is where I was going with PPR paper packaging, is that like, you know, not only do you need and the policy to your initial point in your presentation, Jennifer, it requires incredible amount of science and data, right? And that is the labor of this work, is having that science translated to the people that are willing to be leaders and take a risk, right? So whether it's innovators and companies or leaders creating this policy, or the people that are going to eventually, as I said in the beginning, fund this, right? To take the risk and actually invest in these changes. So that was a long answer for your complicated question.
Okay. Well, all right. We're going to end with a positive note. I know there's a lot of challenges out in the world, right? But we're going to leave here empowered and be positive about really, I mean, this future is bright because there's a lot of opportunities. We just have to take one step at a time, right, Jose? So with that, can we thank our panelists, please, for being here and for sharing their insights? And with that, I will hand it off to Sarah to tell us what we are doing next.
First, can we thank Oma for being a wonderful moderator? I think we got an agenda. Here we go. We'll be taking a break, and then we will be going over to the breakout sessions. So for, all of your burning questions you have for panelists or other people, you can hopefully connect during the break and get into some more dynamic discussions during the breakout session. I will be talking about P2I initiatives, one of which is actually focused on connecting researchers and industry with needs and stuff. So, if you want to hear more about that, I have a plug in mine, but also LSI is presenting on some safety, and Omar will be talking about engaging higher ed. So if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to flag me down or any of the other people.
Just wanted to mention a quick note. So these are the 3 sessions that you're going to be invited to next. One typo that it's on your agenda, it's on the Lab Safety Institute. So they will be talking about not just K-12, but also higher ed and industry lab safety. So you're welcome to attend any of those sessions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of the great participation and discussion we've had so far. I am very excited for us to get the afternoon underway. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Amy to come up and introduce our afternoon keynote speaker.
Awesome. I'm really excited to introduce Richard Gross. It's another one of those way back, because I'm old, back in graduate school, there was like a handful of people doing work in green chemistry. And I remember, and he was one of them. He was one of the early pioneers in this space, early innovators, received one of the Presidential Green Chemistry Challenge Awards when it was presidential. It's no longer presidential. That's another story later over a beer or something. But yeah, so I'm really excited. So Richard Gross is a professor and Constellation Endowed Chair here at the Center for Biotechnology and Interdisciplinary Science here at RPI. He's got a really extensive bio here. Got his PhD from Brooklyn Polytech in polymer stereochemistry and postdoctoral research at UMass Amherst. His laboratory addresses, this is really important, the transition from petroleum-based to renewable plant-derived chemicals and polymers through green chemistry processes, with solutions aimed at mitigating global warming, pollution, and improving human health. We need more of that. Yes, please. Thank you. So he's got all kinds of work. They're all the bios. I think you can all access them too. So I'm not going to go into all of this, but he's published over 400 peer-reviewed articles. I know he's also an innovator and done some fantastic inventions and has a fantastic group here. I'm not going to read it all. Come on up. I'm going to take away from your time here. So I'm really excited. So thank you so much.
All right, so I won't be able to move around because I gotta just point with the mouse. But it's really a pleasure. I'm really sorry I missed the morning. My excuse is I saw Joe Jackson last night. Joe Jackson I mean, for the younger generation, probably don't know, but he's still kicking, and he is. I mean, his concert was amazing. So, drove back this morning, and so, yeah, apologize for missing out on. All right, let's get going. So what I'd like to talk about is this is what the agenda for. So we're going to talk about we're going to talk about the toolbox for chemistry. And one of the things I'm going to emphasize is that in addition to traditional chemical methods that we want to, of course, learn how to do in a more green way, there is biocatalysis. And organic chemists still haven't really, not all, but many have not, don't even consider biocatalysis. It's not something that they learned about, but it has a tremendous potential for us to move towards sustainability and move from petroleum-based to renewables. And so I will be talking about that. Of course, green chemistry roots. I'll talk about polycondensation reactions and talk about how we can use lipases to actually carry those out under mild conditions. We'll talk about peptide synthesis. Peptide synthesis is really, really important. They're tremendous building blocks. They make therapeutics, but they are extraordinarily polluting, the current methods that are. And we'll talk about how we can use microbial fermentation to make things and why that falls under, it can fall under sustainability. And then I'll talk about one example with the microbial surfactants. So these are natural surfactants that we can use. And just to show you, I mean, the way that we when I say our group, my group, looks at problems is we generally innovate in the biocatalysis realm, but a lot of times we need to combine methods. And so I have chemical catalysis and biocatalysis shaking hands here. And the idea is that they work well together. There is a lot of chemical catalysis and enzymatic catalysis steps that when you put them together gets you to the end point more sustainably. So let's talk a little bit about renewable feedstocks. And I would love this to be in the other mode, but all right, it is where it is. So there's agro-based feedstocks. So the major point here is let's not use feedstocks for making chemicals or for fermentations that are competing with food. Let's move towards waste materials like the fermentation residue at the bottom of fermenters There's waste oils. People are quite familiar with that. There's a lot of lignocellulose has been very challenging as a source for glucose. Our lab is looking into making cellulose directly using bacteria, but plant based feedstocks like lignocellulose is a huge target these days, and lots of money have been poured in. I think bacterial cellulose is a better idea, but and so the idea is like looking for what are available feedstocks that end up in the landfill that we're not using, like orange peels, for example. They have lots and lots of useful ingredients locked in, and then they end up in the landfill, which doesn't make any sense. In fact, 30% of the landfill contains food waste. Unbelievable. I mean, these are good organic materials to use for biocatalytic transformations like fermentations, because microbes can take mixed waste and they can convert them to a uniform product, which is just something we can't do chemically, but we can do biocatalytically. So renewable feedstocks is a way for us to transition from petroleum feedstocks to sustainable, renewable. In other words, we cut down a tree, but we can plant a tree, right? Or we can use energy crops, and these are rapid growing, cellulose producing crops. Okay, so as one example of an approach to making polymers, condensation polymerization is a very important approach to making polymers. Polyesters, for example, like PET. PET is made polyethylene terephthalate. That is made by condensation polymerization, and so. How can we green that? Generally, condensation polymerizations are carried out at high temperatures because the catalysts are not that, they function better at the higher temperatures. And so you're working at 150 to 250 degrees C. And so there's a lot of energy input, of course, when you're working at such high temperatures, and they're not selective. But there are cases where selectivity is extremely important. So we can lower the energy input by using enzymes, where enzymes have evolved to work at room temperature, right? They're working even in the wintertime, right? They're working in the Arctic in -40. I mean, they're just astounding. So the opportunity to save energy is there. So selectivity is one important gain. Lowering the temperature, decreasing the energy consumption, and I mean, high atom economy you can get to chemically. So, but the other thing is that it's not a metal catalyst. So you avoid use of metals that can contaminate products. So let's look at an example. So this is a condensation polymerization that we tried a long time ago, and Ajay Kumar was a postdoc. Well, he was a postdoc in the lab. Now he's off doing really great things. And so the idea here was that we wanted to do a condensation polymerization between sorbitol, which is this polyol here, and adipic acid. And if you just did this chemically and you heat it up to a high temperature, what happens? Well, what happens is you end up with a gel, and it turns like orange because there's dehydration and you get unsaturation on the sorbitol. The sorbitol cyclizes like shown here, and you just get a mess. So you get a cross-linked gel that you can't do really much with. But if you use an enzyme, there's selectivity. So the ester bonds that form are primarily between the primary hydroxyls of the sorbitol and the carboxylic acid of the adipic acid. And that makes a generally not perfectly linear, but not cross-linked product where you can get up to molecular weights of around average molecular weights of about 11,000 and have a completely water-soluble, non-gelled system. So you can't, to do that using chemical catalysis, you'd have to do protection, deprotection. You'd have to protect these hydroxyls, all these secondary hydroxyls, and then deprotect after, which would make it not cost competitive. And cost is part of our assessment of green chemistry, right? We want to develop methods that are sustainable and are cost effective. So this is one way we can do it, because now we can address multifunctional building blocks with selectivity and just pick what sites actually react based on the selectivity of the enzyme. And another example that's not as dramatic but similar in nature is we're starting to focus on bioactives and incorporating them in polymers, primarily, looking at the cosmetic industry, which is a wonderful target for entry into new green products, because the value is higher, the volumes are lower. And so it's, of course, really difficult to get commodities directly into the market, because they're competing with low cost existing products. But if you get specialties that are higher cost to the consumer, then you have a chance to establish and grow your technology, and then eventually move it to commodity as you develop process and lower costs. So for example, this work that actually is being done by Natasha Hung, who's an undergraduate in chemistry, she's just moving to her junior year. She's been leading this project along. Lisa Kate is the PhD student working with her, and so she's done some pretty amazing work so far. And she's used this condensation polymerization lipase catalyzed, and we've been able to make different contents vary the molar ratio of the penthanol, which is the bioactive, and yeah, so I didn't really go through, but you can see the properties of penthanol. They're really attractive. I mean, they offer some nice bioactivity and really exciting for the cosmetic industry and the medical industry too. So we're able to vary the amount of penthanol. So the bottom row is showing the highest content of penthanol. So virtually half the polymer is penthanol in this case. And so this would give us a slow release way to deliver penthanol on skin, for example. And you can see that when you have a lot of penthanol, it's oily like that on the left. And so you can make an emulsion, and you can have a wonderful green formulation that you've made by under mild conditions by condensation polymerization using a lipase. So peptide synthesis is an incredible challenge. The idea of greening peptide synthesis is out there, and there are a lot of people working on that. But the approach has been more, hey, let's take solid phase peptide synthesis, which is the predominant way that people make peptides using solid phase peptide synthesis, and let's see if we can green it up. Like, can we change the solvents that we use? Can we get away from protecting groups? And the answer is no, we can't get away from protecting groups because there's a lack of selectivity. So the traditional catalysts and the traditional path here, the problems are that you're using a lot of reagent, you're using a lot of solvents to wash, and the solvents are not green, and so every step, it's a stepwise process. You protect, add, deprotect, protect, add, deprotect. That's just extraordinarily expensive. In other words, a kilogram of a decapeptide could cost $40,000. $40,000. Okay, so where does that leave you? That leaves you with one place it can go. That's therapeutics. And I think that's a real problem because peptides have some extraordinary where's that slide? This was a slide that I wanted to show. They have extraordinary properties. I mean, so you can develop peptides that are highly antimicrobial. They have adhesive properties. They can be used to inhibit ice nucleation. They can do metal chelation. This is a big deal today where we're looking to recover heavy metals. Peptides can do that. Degradable cross-links, electronic material. Yeah, so there's just an incredible array of, like, for example, in adhesives, barnacle peptides, proteins can adhere underwater. And that's a very unique feature that biology brings. So how do we start to develop methods that can lower the cost and gets away from these toxic reagents and solvents? Well, so our approach is to use proteases. So proteases are selective, but we think of them as breaking down proteins, not making peptides. So we generally use proteases to break down proteins, and that's great, and we need that. For example, there are allergenic proteins that are in foods, and so you use a protease, breaks down the proteins to amino acids. It's non-allergenic now, and baby is happy. And that's important. You want baby to be upset. So this is showing you some work by a former student, Robert Santour. Well, you're always a student, your whole life. So in Robert's work, so what we were doing here is we're using an amino acid ethyl ester. An ethyl ester is just a very friendly molecule. So ethanol comes off, right? And if ethanol comes off, we can distill it and we can use it again. Yeah, so ethanol is the molecule that kind of drives things. And so now when you put a protease in the presence of amino acids where you have ethyl esters, you actually build peptides. And so this is a kinetically driven process, and it really works well. So for example, if we have a PEG system here, and then we have the phenylalanine sitting here, the phenylalanine is recognized by the protease, and then we could have we could choose our monomer that we want to add to the end of the chain, like leucine here. And so when you hit like 5 leucines, you have this hydrophobic segment and hydrophilic segment, and of course when things are like water and don't like water, they assemble in water, and the hydrophobic amines get hidden inside, right? And the hydrophilic amines get outside, and so these assemble into nanoparticles, and it's all done in water, and so it's direct to product. And this is another example where the enzyme that's used is papain, and it's an extract from Caraca papaya. So if you've had papaya, yes, it tastes good, and it has some really good proteases in there. So this enzyme is catalyzing the oligomerization of glutamic acid. So this is diethyl glutamate. So you have to make the diethyl ester, which is really simple and very green. And then in the presence of papain, papain recognizes that there are 2 ester groups, and it says, I only want to react with the alpha one. I'm not going to react with the gamma one. And so you get this selective synthesis of a peptide because the papain is itself selective. And so this work was done a while ago, but we are continuing with our peptide synthesis, and the ultimate aim is to be able to make sequence control peptides all enzymatically without any deprotection groups. And that's where we're going. Just one other example. This is Martin, losing it. Martin's, and he's a current PhD student in the lab, and he's been working on oligotyrosine. So oligomers of tyrosine, you could just look at this molecule and say, this is an antioxidant, this is highly reactive, dimers and trimers can be used as drugs for Alzheimer's because they inhibit amyloid formation, all kinds of great stuff. And we get it so easily. We just need to make the ethyl ester of tyrosine and use the right enzyme in water, and boom, we have it. No protection, deprotection. We don't have to. And all the other methods need to protect the phenol. So we've been making these enzymes recombinantly. Why? Because the science was happening as that's extracted from papaya latex is problematic because the proteases are actually a mixture. So it's not just happening. It actually contains 5 major proteases. So Honorable here, who's a postdoc at RPI, has been expressing and providing pure papain. And this is, and the isozymes. So these are very similar to each other in structure. So why did we want to do this? Because we're curious. We want to see, maybe it's not papain that's doing the reaction. Maybe it's it's, protease omega, or maybe it's the proteinase 4. We have to look, right? So we're assessing all of the different enzymes and asking the question, hey, which is better, which is more selective, what is it selective for in terms of peptide synthesis? But it gets better, because if we go back to cosmetics, papain is used as a mixture for skin applications. So if we focus on this box, all the characteristics that papain can deal with when we put it on skin. It's really an effective cosmetic ingredient. And so now we have a nice green protein. We do have to make sure it's non-allergenic, but people have been using papain, and I'm not saying that's right, but as a mixture. And of course, we got to get the cost down. So we have to get efficient fermentation processes to use it. So there's just a really wide box that now we can address, now that we've expressed these enzymes and others like bromelain that comes from another fruit. We like fruits. So microbial surfactants, let's talk a little bit about that. So surfactants, so I should mention, down the drain products are not, they don't capture people's attention because we don't see them. So like, think about your shampoos, your soaps, anything that goes down the drain. Plastics, on the other hand, you see it. We can see plastic pollution, right? So everyone's kind of tuned in on that, and so am I. But down the drain, polymers and chemicals, drugs, for example, people pour drugs into the toilet and flush the toilet, and these drugs end up in the waterways. I'm not sure if this was discussed this morning. So thinking about, things that go down the drain is important. And surfactants are one of those things. We also use surfactants in the environment. For example, if there's an oil spill, this horrible kind of thing like that, if we have microbial surfactants, they can biodegrade, they can be effective, and we'll get to that. So this just shows, this slide is hey, we can have ingredients that are like fatty acids that are the hydrophobe. We can have sugars that are the hydrophil, and we could build bio-based surfactants pretty easily from purely bio-based, and they'll be fully biodegradable. And people are working on that. I mean, like alkyl glucosides are out there. 5 minutes. Okay, got it. So they're out there. So microbial surfactants, we have been focusing on saphrolipids. That's the top box. And so microbes can make this very efficiently. So, and these are all the things that modified and generally modified surfactants can do. And so we can see anti-cancer, cosmetic formulations, wound healing. I mean, all of these applications can be addressed with microbial surfactants. And to add to the good news, let's move up here, is that we can make these in volumes. So it's grams per liter of this material, and you can see the bottom layer. It phase separates on the bottom, so it's easy to separate. One of the killers to green processes is downstream processing and fermentation. That is, so you can get high titers, which means high volumes of product, like 200 grams per liter. but you need efficient conversion of the. So what do you need for sustainable fermentation processes? You need a high titer, so that's a high volumetric yield, high carbon conversion. It means what you feed goes to product, not to CO2, and efficient downstream process that can avoid or at least use green solvents that can be recycled. These are important considerations. So just because you make it by fermentation doesn't mean it's sustainable. That's an important point. So, someone says, "Oh, I've got a sustainable process to make this protein." We have not made recombinant papain sustainably. The titers are too low. We have to get the titers up. And so just, just because it's biocatalysis and fermentation doesn't mean it's green. So my time is running out. This is just showing you that a modified saccharolipid crude oil does a better job of emulsifying crude oil. We bought all these oils from different areas, and it turns out the butyl ester of saccharolipids is wonderful, and it should have been used instead of Corexit, the Nalco product. It would have been much better for the environment because it would have biodegraded. Other surfactants can be recalcitrant and they accumulate in aqueous systems. Also, these kind of molecules are antimicrobial. So you can see that as we modify it, and you go down a column, for example, here, as we change the ester group, we can significantly decrease the concentration we need to kill the organism. All right, so a little bit of chemistry in there, plus the biocatalysis, nice, works. And we can use it as a pesticide. I know, I'm almost done. So we can use it as a pesticide here. You could see which was treated with the modified saccharolipid, and it works really well, and it's safe. Okay, and plastic pollution. I don't know if you talked about it this morning, but it's just a serious problem, and you can see it, so everybody knows. And just to say that we have developed a protein that can break down PET. So Kavita Radnath, shown here, she just defended her thesis, and we have one of the best proteases, the best enzymes to break down PET in the world. And we should commercialize it to make money. So why is it green to use an enzyme? Well, lower temperature. So you can chemically recycle PET. You can break it down chemically, but you need high temperatures, you need catalysts, metal catalysts. Here we can simply use an enzyme in aqueous solution and break it down. Back to the monomers, and then you could repolymerize it. So this is just a summary of the things that we talked about, and a picture of not all, but many of the group members. And I'd be glad to take any questions. Thank you.
We're going to move right into the panel section. So if you have questions for Professor Gross, please join us up here too, so we can take questions with the panel.
All right. Good afternoon again. Are we sleepy? Are we tired? Do we need to get up and just move around a little bit? More coffee? I think there's still coffee outside, right? Probably. Well, here we are again. We're going to do one last panel discussion on the title of this one is Education and Workforce Readiness. So I know we've touched a little bit on some education and readiness, workforce development in the first panel this morning, but we're going to tackle it with a different lens with a new panel. So, panelists, are you all ready for this? No, yes. So I'm going to challenge you, like I did in the morning, to give you all 2 minutes to introduce yourselves, add anything that you might want to add, and then we'll dive into some questions. So I'm going to start on that end over there.
Okay, great. So my name is Michelle Crimmy. I'm the Vice President for Research and Innovation at Clarkson University. And my background is environmental engineering. And so while I think about green chemistry from a university perspective and an innovation perspective, I also think of it through the lens of my own background. And I have a startup company, so trying to make sure we're thinking about it in our own work as well. In addition to the research and innovation operations at Clarkson, the graduate school activity falls under me, and our continuing and workforce education falls to my area. And so a lot of what we've been thinking about and working hard towards is when we see these important principles, like green chemistry principles, we don't want to think about it from a research perspective or a new startup perspective or a graduate student education perspective, et cetera. We want to make sure we're embracing these holistically in everything that we do. And so I think of green chemistry as a philosophy. And I was really getting a lot out of this morning's panel because I was kind of hearing that come alive, right? Where our innovators are learning green chemistry principles, but our chemists are also learning principles of innovation. So I'll stop there. I'm hoping my answers to the rest of the questions kind of reflect this idea as well.
Scott?
Thinking about.
Yep, you need to go. Yes, good. Good afternoon. There we go. My name is Scott Carlson. I am a green chemistry educator from New York City. I've been working with teachers and students for the better part of about 20 years across different forms in green chemistry education. It's an honor to work with Beyond Benign since 2014 on their green chemistry teaching and learning program, and one of the founding members for the platform, Green Chemistry Teaching and Learning Community. I also mentor teachers as they go through their graduate and undergraduate journeys toward education. So I've mentored a number of teachers who now became green chemists in their classrooms and how they've structured their classrooms. And many of my students went on to work on research as they went on. Actually, I was talking about the SYEP and the YES program. I was actually one of Professor Gross's students in the year 2000 for a high school program for developing chemistry as well. With that progress, I'm looking forward to hopefully getting some chance to answer some of your questions, give you some insight to the ramp that students must rise over to be able to enter the green chemistry field and give context for a great deal of ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Hi, Kathy Rudistel, and I am an independent consultant. I work under the business name Safer Chemistry Advisory. I've been working in contracting consulting for most of my career. I've been working in this area for 20 years. Like a lot of people in this room, I have a background in undergrad in chemistry, and I was raised with a very traditional chemistry-focused education and background. And when I went to the workforce is when I started getting interested in the environmental and sustainability fields. And I learned earlier on in my career when I was working for a group that was working very much in the regulatory assessment, chemical assessment space, that there was a gap and then a need of understanding how the chemical information can lead to safer chemical decisions. And I got really interested in green chemistry, the alternatives assessment community, and then I started my own independent consulting firm a few years ago with the mind to do more of that and engage more in the safer chemistry fields. And now these days, my focus is more on less in the kind of chemical hazard assessment and chemical assessment work, and more so it's taking those approaches and turning it into decisionable, actionable information for organizations. And I engage with a variety of organizations across multiple industries. One of my taglines is I follow the chemistry, not the industry. And it certainly leads to a lot of really interesting work for my part. So it's been a really fun journey so far. So I work with multiple organizations, a lot of outreach advocacy organizations. I still continue work and engagement with government agencies, particularly through my partnerships with P2I, and also in dabbling also in the commercial sector as well. So really interested and happy to be on the panel.
Thank you. Lydia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vidya Chakrabarti. I'm an associate professor in the Chemical and Biological Engineering department here at RPI. I would say my research is I'm basically an electrochemist. I work with semiconductor material, electrochemistry of semiconductor materials. This is mainly for, I would say, green energy technology. I don't work on green chemistry, but I would say green energy technology. Using semiconductor-based material as catalyst for, let's say, solar fuels, using sunlight to, produce fuels. Like you can think of splitting water to form hydrogen and oxygen, and the hydrogen that you produce is one of the cleanest. It has no carbon in it, and it's called green hydrogen. So, other examples, I work on batteries. Right now, I'm working on a project of using light or UV-based material, UV light for degrading PFAS. These are fluorinated chemicals. I worked in microelectronic industry for like a couple of years before I joined RPI. So I've been aware firsthand knowledge of working in the fab and how much chemicals they use and kind of fluorinated gases that are used for etching silicon wafers. And if you think about it, these gases, which is chlorofluorocarbons, these have global warming potentials that are really like 50,000 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And here we are worrying about carbon dioxide. So these gases they're very, very stable molecules. But they are also very difficult to degrade. So you have fluorinated chemicals in the form of solid waste, liquids, gases that are just being emitted into that environment. And how do you tackle it? And I know Irina talked about it in the morning. She said they have specific project on, eliminating these kind of fluorocarbon-based gases from the etch industry. It's very challenging because the microelectronic industry, $1 trillion industry, is a highly optimized system, and replacing anything is not easy. While they find a long-term solution, we also need short-term solutions for it. And I think looking for easier way of degrading these kind of chemicals, like liquid chemicals like PFAS, or helping it, either degrading them or converting them to a value-added chemicals that could be reused in the same microelectronic industry is important. So I'm working on, this is a project that is funded by the New York State. So I'm working on developing catalyst materials for PFAS conversion.
Thank you. And Richard, do you have anything else to add?
I'll just kind of give my background. So I started, I did my PhD work, and it was like 10-step synthesis to make monomer. And what attracted me to the project was there wasn't anyone. So I went to Brooklyn Poly. It no longer exists. It's now NYU School of Engineering. So I was attracted to this one professor who said he is making helical polymers. They're like proteins. And I said, well, there's no one else I can work with, and they're like proteins, so I'll do that. But he didn't care at all. I mean, I don't know that he didn't care, but he never considered like what reagent we use or anything like that. So I didn't get any training in green chemistry from my PhD. Then I did but that was, that was really, I wanted to integrate biology and polymers. That was my goal, career goal, going into grad school. Didn't get it in grad school. Then I did a postdoc at UMass Amherst, got my chance. I worked with Bob Lenz and I worked every day with a microbiologist, and we were making polyhydroxyalkanoates. And so these are polyesters, biodegradable polyesters that are made by cells. And they're still not really gigantic products. The market share is extraordinarily low, and because of costs. And there's a lot to learn about green chemistry just talking about PHAs, why they're not low cost. And then I went to UMass Lowell, and I'll make this quick. I'm almost done. So I had this thought, like I wanted to study biodegradation of polymers, but then I said, hey, how am I going to study this in a realistic way? So we started to simulate landfills and compost in the lab. Because if you bury it in a compost outside, the conditions could be so variable. Soils, you just can't get a handle. You can't get any reproducibility. So we developed test methods, and that's where that was, and it just kind of went from there. I won't take any more. So.
Okay, awesome, thank you. We love stories. So as you all can see, we have a pretty diverse panelist again for talking about education, workforce development. So my first question, I'm gonna pick on you, Scott. Goes with the workforce readiness topic. So you get students earlier than any of us here, in this space, and way before they even consider a career in chemistry, right? They probably don't even think that they can have a career in chemistry. So do you think that do you see a gap between like what kind of skills that you might be, what these students are facing at that time in their education? And is there anything that you would recommend, like any K-12 educator, to do to prepare them for a career in chemistry?
So the answer is twofold. First off, it was alluded to in an earlier session today about hemophobia and the process by which students actually approach chemistry in their daily lives, which is part of why even green chemistry becomes of paramount importance from a civilian perspective, from a student perspective, before they even get into high school. And one of the first things to answer the second part of the question first, I would advocate for would be something akin to a toxicology course on the junior high school level. A lot of students don't and they recognize the actual risks versus hazards that apply to the things they deal with in their everyday lives. And if the first time they're experiencing that is in our pre-college science studies, they're already formulating what their future plans are going to be. And they've already negated, well, I'm not doing chemistry yet because I don't understand it. My first experience with it is in this high school class. If my first experience with it was in junior high school, my first experience was at a summer program or a science studies or science skills requirement, my approach to it would be a lot more open and most likely would have a less phobic tint to it. With regard to how professionals can do this for their students on a case-by-case basis, my advocacy would be speaking about exposing them to the relevant consumer chemistry that they're exposed to as well. Yes, as it was alluded to earlier, it's natural, but is it safe? It's present, but is it the best possible way to administer this particular procedure? And you may not have the solutions to the problems, but giving students a space and a voice and a safe opportunity to voice the concerns they already had and ask the questions without stagnation, without
thinking about
ridicule, without, oh, you're not taking chemistry seriously. To make sure we don't alienate students from that idea would lead to a lot more approachable students in approachable sciences.
Okay, yeah, that's a great response. It's really deep, right? Vidya, I'm gonna pick on you now. So we're gonna slowly move our way up from K-12 into higher ed. So you mentioned that the work that you do is very important, obviously. But when you take on students to work on research projects or to work on any of your research materials, do you see that there might be a gap in the curriculum that they come in? Are there any skills that you're like, oh, I wish they would have taken these courses or they would have learned about this so that they could be a little more prepared to work on my research? Anything you might want to mention on that or that you might see?
Sure. Actually, I have only positive things to say because, until a few years ago, RPI was running a summer at Rensselaer program. They used to get high school students
into for the summer research, 6 weeks of hands-on research in the summer. And, we used to build demo kits and then they go out and present in Olympiads and science fairs and things like that. So I would say the students that come in, as long as they have a general awareness for environment and, energy conservation and water conservation, I think that's pretty good. And the students I get are, I got some really fantastic students, actually. So, and I feel like, if they have the general appreciation for environment and energy, and I think the rest of the things are something that they can learn in their undergraduate, once they join an RPI or in any other school. That's something that they can learn in. So I actually don't see that there is a gap in the knowledge, or I think they are pretty aware that they read it in news. There are people that see it in YouTube, and I think there's a general awareness that is high for this kind of sustainable research, that it's actually a positive thing.
Okay, that's great to hear, because I feel like I went to grad school and I didn't learn about any green chemistry topics before going into graduate school. So I can't even imagine being this competitive now in this new.
I feel like, it's very different from when I went to college.
Sure, yeah, when we were there, right?
Exactly. So now students are, and I feel that students are much more aware, and they get their knowledge from so many different sources. AI is one. So.
Okay, well, that's good. We hear positivity, right? In terms of where we might be moving towards. Richard, I'm going to move on to you next. And I'm skipping around a little bit, but with all the research that you've done over the years and all the students you've mentored, in your view, how could the current chemistry curriculum, and specifically something we haven't really talked too much about, is the research experience for undergraduates, how, and graduate students as well, be modified to better integrate green chemistry concepts and knowledge?
Okay, so I'm going to be injecting negativity. So in fact, this fall, I'm kind of on a mission. So our chemistry program is not well integrated with biocatalysis and green chemistry concepts, and it disturbs me, obviously, and so I'm going to be working to create some labs, new labs that address biocatalytic processes. This seems like, at least the chemists that we have here, they were trained by traditional chemistry, and it's however I can get to the molecule. And so we have one medicinal chemist, and I won't say the name, but he absolutely doesn't think about green chemistry. He just gets to, he wants to make that drug molecule, and that's all that he cares about. And once he makes it, he wants to see how the activity, and so he sends it to another group to assess. Bottom line is, it's not well integrated into the undergraduate or the graduate curriculum here, and and I see this as a major problem. And I don't know. I mean, I don't. When I was at UMass Lowell, it really wasn't integrated there, and I was at Brooklyn Poly, and it wasn't integrated there, and it's not integrated here. So all three of my experiences are negative in terms of that. If we don't do that, that will be a crime. If we don't educate our students with understanding that part of the toolbox is biocatalysis, it's not just traditional chemical methods, and that they need to think about what solvent they use, atom economy, process intensity, and all these things. It has to be throughout the curriculum, and that's my major point.
Okay, that's a great perspective. So we can talk a little bit more offline about the Green Chemistry Commitment Program. You're not alone. Definitely, we hear this from many institutions around, not just in the U.S. but globally, that we really want to implement green chemistry into our curriculum, and that's where the Green Chemistry Commitment Program help.
I just add, that every student in a group that does research with me understands. I mean, we talk about it. Can we use a renewable feedstock instead of a chemical one? What solvent are we using? Can we not use any solvents at all? And the other point I think is really critical is that when these students go to industry, they need to be retrained. They require 2 years of training. So because industry understands, because they need to make money. So if you have toxic waste, that costs money. If you don't have a high atom economy, that costs money. You can't sell the product. So and you can't start with something that's $1,000 for 10 milligrams. So okay, we can do that kind of research here at academics. We on a really small scale, but it's not relevant. It's not relevant to the world that they're going to go into, and that's very important. We will have much more success with the students that we graduate if we train them so that they think about these things. Cost is part of green chemistry, and cost is something that industry understands. I believe that industry is way ahead in terms of thinking about green chemistry, and that that they've been implementing green chemistry for years. They just haven't been implementing biocatalysis so much. There are more, but
okay. Thank you. That's a great perspective. So we've heard from K-12 students, start off having some skills that they eventually go to college, right? And hopefully they'll get into a career in chemistry. They might experience some research experiences. So let's get a little bit further up in that view. So Michelle, let me go and ask you a question. So you really sit at this intersection of research, industry partnerships, and university strategy in the work that you do on a day-to-day. From your perspective, what role should universities or colleges be playing in workforce development for green chemistry? Let's use green chemistry as the example. And where is there still, if there is, a mismatch between what universities produce and what, let's say, New York or other states around the nation, industry actually needs? If you have any perspective on that.
Yes, I do. And I think I'm going to be reflecting on what some of our other panelists have said. So I think there's two key roles at least, and I think there's several gaps, and this is why I have notes, because I'd either forget or change my mind if I didn't have them in front of me. So I think a really critical role, and I heard my colleagues say this here, is to have conversations with industry, because we need to bring the context into the classroom. And, it's one thing for me to be here in my role, which I get paid to interact with industry partners on the regular. Our research centers get paid to interact with industry partners. We need more opportunities for our faculty to be doing that on the regular. And that'll take me to gaps in a moment. The other role I think universities can play is making sure we're cross-cutting our curricula with not just principles of green chemistry, but even more broadly, systems thinking, circularity, and the innovation mindset. If we cross-cut our curriculum, then you're going to build that value system that drives green chemistry, and then the students will bring that to their jobs and their companies and into the workforce. So the gaps that I think we have, I focused on three. One is time. In higher ed, we operate on semesters or multi-year contracts for research. And, thinking about getting something into the university and pushing something out of the university. I hear this a lot from our partners it takes too long. It takes longer than we want it to. So we need to do a better job in our universities of hearing the needs, bringing them in, meeting them faster. Thinking about do a good job, to be clear. I just think we could continue to do an even better job. And I think the second one is context, and I referred to this a little bit earlier, just making sure we're bringing that industry context. So our students aren't leaving thinking about being motivated to be green chemists and getting into industry. We've heard this in the morning panel. I wish I could remember who said it, but they have this aha moment where it's that aha excitement. It might be, this is it, right? If we bring them reality, then they remain excited and enthused, well grounded in reality. And then the third thing I would say is scale. And I think we heard lots of basic examples about scale. It's one thing to do things in the lab, but really be thinking about what happens once it leaves the lab. I can synthesize this molecule here, doing this, but then what happens when it's got to go, out of here? What are the energy implications? What are the materials implications? What are the toxicity implications, and so on? So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, this is a great perspective. I'm going to follow up with a non-script question, but as an administrator, any advice that you could give to any faculty, students in the audience about how we might want to slowly approach that big problem?
Yeah, don't do it slow. Think,
it could be overwhelming if we do it all at once, right?
Right. I think it's really seeking out the inspiration, right? I think most faculty are really driven by this idea of making a difference in the world. And I think a lot of that inspiration can come from industry if it isn't already. And if we proactively are talking with industry to kind of fulfill that need to make a difference, then we're going to start bringing that back with us. I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
Students, I would say, go seek the inspiration, right? Go find those companies that are really doing well. What got you excited about going into the field in the first place, and learn everything you can about it, and think about how you're going to carry that over into the future. If you land a job with a company that's not doing it already, well, you can remain really excited by carrying that over into the company you're working for.
All right. Thank you. That's a great advice. And lastly, Kathy, so we've seen everything that all the insights from higher ed and K-12, and you spent a lot of your career helping organizations adopt safer chemicals and materials. And now you advise companies on integrating green chemistry into their operations. When you sit across a client, for example, what skills or capabilities do you wish more of their new hires when arriving with to those organizations, and where should education be preparing students a little bit better, in your opinion? Maybe you have a positive note as well. I don't know.
This is a deceptively simple question. I think, and I've taken some time to reflect on it. I think for folks that are interested in green chemistry sustainability, they're being brought up in, at the chemistry undergrad level. For example, I think what's missing, I think, is the multidisciplinary aspect. Because if you think about how we're defining sustainable chemistry, if you're operating in the chemical alternatives space, it's a much more holistic viewpoint of sustainability. It's not just toxicity, as that's a very important part of it. But there's also other elements like impacts to businesses, the economics of the materials or your alternative chemicals. It's the idea that maybe your alternative isn't even a chemical, and it's, so we have to make space for this differing perspective. And that's hard to get as someone, it's been a while since I've been in academic space. I'm not a full-time educator. I've done some work with instructing at online continuing education course at the University of Washington. It's about assessment tools for safer chemical decisions.
But the folks that are in that class are already grad students that are very much interested in this space, or they're for working professionals that are very much in the thick of it and trying to hone their skills. So that's kind of a biased experience because they always already want this information. But I think what would be most helpful is to, particularly in an undergrad chemistry space, would be to encourage that multidisciplinary experience through either the coursework or through like internships. And particularly at the internships, I would encourage
thinking about
experience that's not in a laboratory.
Thinking about
working cross-cutting into another field. So if you're, you've been in the chemistry labs in undergrad, you've been in chemistry courses, and, take the time to get work experience in another field that is overlaps or is adjacent to what you're interested in. And I think maybe the universities can help coordinate that with that work experience for the younger folks. So that way they have this experience, and this was brought up in the earlier panel, about being able to just talk to people who are not chemists, but you're still working towards the same goal is a challenge. Particularly when you're not just with issues of chemophobia, but just the fact that, well, I guess this is chemophobia, but just that feeling of like when you tell somebody you're a chemist, and they're just like, ugh, like what's wrong with you? But you have to work with them, and you have to figure out how to make your case and how to work together towards a shared goal. So, it's a variety in a multidisciplinary approach. As far as coursework goes, in my opinion, I think Toxicology 101 should be essential pretty much for every chemistry major, right? If you're going to green chemistry or not. You just have to understand the basics of this. I would also say, an environmental course, because I left my undergrad and I went into work and I got hired into an environmental health assessment firm. And I told them straight up, like, I've never taken an environmental class. It wasn't even required. I don't know where it is like right now, but they were like, it's cool. We'll teach you that. We can teach you that part of it. It's harder for them, in their perspective, it was harder to teach someone in the environmental side, the chemistry side, because that's a special power that people do value. So, and from there, it was having to learn a lot more about toxicology, but it was all, it was kind of like you sort of fall into it. You sort of, whereas I think, as I said, with tweaking the curriculum, better integrating, just the coursework, but maybe encouraging more cross-cutting minors versus if you're a chemistry major, maybe a minor in something that is perhaps maybe not obviously relevant, but can be, because again, the scope of the impacts is very wide. I mean, if you're into sociology, there's interest in environmental justice, and that combination of skills would be incredibly valuable. So it's in part what I think the student is interested in and what is, what inspires them. But I also think there's opportunities to kind of, make the curriculum and that track more, open to, different perspectives and experiences.
Actually, I want to just add on to it. So we talk so much about green chemistry. So I just also want to add something about green engineering. As a chemical engineer, for example, we emphasize safety. We have a chemical process safety course. It's part of an ABET requirement. And at RPI, we take a 0 credit chemical process safety course that is offered by AICHE, which is the American Institute of Chemical Engineers. And I think what is missing from our undergraduate chemical engineering curriculum, I feel like we must integrate, like you said, toxicology study, environmental study. And I think one idea that I have is it could be that we could have a 0 credit mandatory course on, it could be, green chemistry. I don't distinguish between chemistry and chemical engineering. Let's say it's a green chemistry or environmental chemistry that all chemical engineering should take. And I think there are many videos offered by ACS, and I think Beyond Deadline also has some videos. It could be anything like that the students should take. And one point I also want to make is that this is important not just for people interested in green chemistry careers. because it's also important for raising the general awareness of people. For example, you could end up in a job which has nothing to do with green chemistry. For example, I had an undergrad student who worked with me, and he actually he's a PhD student now at a different university. He went and worked for Department of Energy as a research program manager for a year, and he loved it. And he said, that's what I'm going to do in the future. So maybe you'll be a science advisor, or maybe something who have a position of influence that you can actually shape what the research direction will be. So I feel like the green chemistry concept, or green engineering, or green process must be integrated into the curriculum, not just for people interested in green chemistry career, but for general awareness as well.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Thank you. So we're great on time. We have a little bit over 20 minutes, but I want to check in on the temperature of the room, the audience. Any questions?
Thinking about.
All right.
Just in case someone can, right? I just wanted to go ahead. A lot of stuff's been said about coursework, and I just wanted to ask where you guys stood as far as accreditation of your courses. How does this overlap with, can we go ahead and introduce sustainability, toxicology, and still satisfy the requirements for accreditations and certifications at the various different levels?
At least for the high school and collegiate level, some of the standards adopted by New York State are the next generation science standards. And as my colleague conceded to earlier regarding the idea of cross-cutting concepts, part of sustainability and the ideal of creative grade biodegradation and design in the curriculum is already part of it. It's a question of whether or not a teacher or a professor uses that as a focal point in their dissemination of the curriculum. It's in the curriculum. It's not always the elected choice of the individual proprietor of the course to make it a focal point to reinvestigate. But it is something that isn't available to it. Most colleges have an option for an elective environmental chemistry or an elective sustainable science course that may or may not be on the same level of, as you mentioned, accreditation that aligns with a requirement for a particular science degree. But a lot of times it is one of the requirements to ascend in terms of each academic level.
Thinking about.
Any higher ed folks want to add?
I would just say that as far as chemical engineering is concerned, we have as a part of ABET, you're supposed to take chemistry, so many number of chemistry courses, HAS courses. So we have sustainability in so many, students get sustainability concept and our energy and sustainability in so many different ways. There are HAS pathways that are focused on sustainability, and there are courses on chemistry. It's just that they don't think about it in terms of green chemistry, but I think they get a little bit of sustainability in so many different courses that they take, and which is all part of ABET. So satisfies the ABET part.
Thinking about.
Anyone else?
Thinking about.
Yeah, so we've, in our chemistry programs here at RPI, we have the option of tracks, and we're adding tracks. And one of the tracks that was recently added was environmental chemistry. So that's a good start. And so now students can choose and take, is it 4? Yeah. So it's 4 courses in environmental chemistry. And so you could still
thinking about
accredited, within ACS. One of the tracks that I would like to work on for the fall is bioprocessing as a tool, as a tool for sustainability. We talked about a green chemistry track. That could have the toxicology in it. So I think these tracks are a nice way to give students an opportunity to, for example, more computational chemistry, right? I mean, tracks are a nice way to give people a broader opportunity so they can fit their interests into our program. So they can pick a track that really aligns with their career goals, but also gives them the opportunity to learn about sustainability and circularity and, you know, all of the end process. And I think the point that was brought up about process, I think in terms of process, but not a lot of chemists do. And I think that's something we need to bring in to the curriculum, like this concept of scale up. It should be something that students understand, that, you know, that they're not just learning about the reactions, but they're learning about, okay, well, how would you carry out this reaction if it went to 10,000 pounds? And, you know, what would you do with that solvent that this reaction is run with? Is there another way? I mean, it can be done if the faculty that teach the courses are, you know, cognizant of that. These are critical issues, because, you know, sometimes professors forget that most of our students are not going into academics. They're going into industry. And we have to prepare them for that that route. And so, you know, I mean, to not talk about process as a chemist, that's critically important. They need to get that right up front.
Okay. Any other panelists want to tackle that question? It's a hard one.
Thinking about
Offering one alternative idea, talking about curriculum, alma certification. How about this panel see a point where P2I or somebody offers straight certification, and it's a consolidated program of those materials that each of you contribute best practice.
Thinking
resource. And speaking also from my own voice education policy experience.
Thinking about
some of the teaching now is done on YouTube and TikTok and a couple of safety board, and they have access to some really great topics and some best illustrations. Why more you collect? I don't know talk about. Watch this video class. But Janet B.
Thinking about
the program. Does it have to be integrated into our existing software curriculum and saying this is the certification we want to stand for?
Can I respond to the certificate question? So I mentioned the course, like the continuing education course that I'm involved in, and that's actually part of a green chemistry certificate program that is offered through the University of Washington. I know that other universities do offer. I think Yale offers a continuing education certificate. I know that from UW's perspective, they offer the courses in that certificate to active students as well. So there are graduate students, and I actually think I had a couple plucky undergrads get into the course as well. And the ones that are really interested, which is always fantastic because clearly they're in it and they really like it. So and then you get all the inspiring exchanges. But yeah, the certificate program might be a good opportunity for universities. One, because it might be an initial source of revenue for, especially those that are working professionals. These courses can be, companies might actually sponsor their employees to take these courses. And
comment on that. It's a challenge, not a barrier, but a challenge is that many companies don't pay for certificates. So they'll pay for you to take a 30 credit master's degree program and pay full ride, but they're not going to pay for you to take a 9 or 12 credit certificate program. So we've been working with industry to try to educate them on the value of, the shorter programs, and all the technical people buy in, but we got to get the HR systems of industry to buy in. Because a lot of times adult learners are only going to spend the time doing it if it's going to be covered by their company, the company values it. So, people will still do it. Don't get me wrong. So, thinking about
Just to talk about the idea of is it a great idea for certificate versus integrated into the entirety of the program? When you start to analyze andragogy versus pedagogy, science for teaching adults versus science for teaching young ones, there's a distinct difference in the level of differentiation that has to be done or that's mandated to be able to administer or adhere knowledge to a person's mind. That differentiation occurs largely at the point at which, is it a passive learning system or is it a interaction between and building relationships with your students as a professor, as a teacher, as a educator? Yeah, there are a lot of fantastic YouTube, and there are a lot of, we use technology in vastly imaginative ways on all levels of education. The question becomes how much of that translates into a student, either, if not the echelon of it, pursuing a green chemistry career in specifics, at the very least being green chemistry and sustainable chemistry literate by the time of their completion of that program. What brings to my mind is one of the things John Warner said, not today, but in his previous conversations, that the goal of green chemistry is that it stops being called green. Just becomes how we do chemistry. So putting it into perspective of the context of something that's just how chemistry is taught, and that becomes the cradle to the grave conversation about the pedagogical perspective, is why what might be in the best interest of programs seeking to make that the standard as opposed to the exception, is why necessarily a certificate might not be the most advantageous route.
Thinking about.
Yeah, so I totally agree. I mean, I think so certificate programs are definitely useful to give somebody a focus. Like, for example, let's say, in biocatalysis, the techniques in biotechnology, biocatalysis are more specialized. They may not have gotten that, and let's say that that's something they want to go into, in pharma or cosmetics or whatever. That's a good place. But I think if you don't integrate it into the curriculum, you lose that opportunity to really affect, as somebody matures and their picture of chemistry grows. I mean, like, I remember, like, as an undergrad, like, I continue to visualize chemistry in a deeper way, like, as I went through the program. And it would have been so nice if part of that was understanding process and understanding sustainability concepts, and it just would have all been integrated into the way I learned. So I think that there's a place for both. But if you, let's say, so I think a student would be less motivated to take that certificate program if they didn't get it along the way. Like, they wouldn't. Yeah. I mean, like, for example, I should, when I find a YouTube video that teaches the subject better than I can, I'll play it during when I'm teaching. I'll play that video. I mean, I'll use YouTube when it's appropriate. When I find something that that somebody's explaining much better than I could. So.
Okay, and I'm going to put a plug in here for educators. Beyond Benign has developed an online asynchronous course. It's also a certificate that offers educators in higher ed. Right now, it's only higher ed where we're exploring other courses, but that actually does that for you. It's like a 5-hour training, essentially, a certificate that an educator in higher ed could take to learn about how to implement green chemistry at the curriculum level to whatever extent they might want. So right now it's currently free. I don't Amy's not around, but currently it's free. And it's something that we have identified from the community as a need. And so industry has heard that and funded the course. So check it out. We have a flyer outside.
Thinking about.
Okay. Question in the back?
Yeah. So in the 60s film, The Graduate, the advice to Dustin Hoffman, right, was plastics. Remember? Okay. So now we're on 2026, and we're thinking green. Am I going to say fungus? What else would I say in 2026?
Thinking about.
What's the advice? Give someone who's got to make it better important.
Integrate computation, AI, ML.
Okay.
Of course. I mean, AI. Yeah, and we have to learn as scientists and how to generate the data and train the models. I mean, we need to learn about how to exploit the power of AI. And so I think that's a critical, I mean, on a national level, it's obviously a priority. If you look at what's being funded these days, I mean, AI is in a lot of the calls for proposals. Like integrate AI with this and that and that and that. I mean, it's a big push, but rightfully so. Right, rightfully so. It's a powerful tool.
So fungus is a thing, right? Biocatalysis, right?
Yes.
Still now, I mean, are we learning more about?
Of course, yeah. I mean, fungal biotransformations. I mean, look at, for example, Ecovative. They make they're a company that's spun out of RPI, and they use fungal systems to make materials, foams, wood boards. I mean, things that look like wood boards, meat, so plant-based or cell-based meat alternatives, all that. So yeah, I mean, there's also a push to make materials out of whole cells, for example. Yeah, I mean, because if a cell is full of a particular material like chitin, there are fungal cells use chitin in their cell walls, and chitin is a wonderful material. So you could use whole cells as long as you don't heat it too high so that it discolors, or you have a way to control color.
Thinking about.
Okay. Time.
Thinking about.
She wants a question. Yes, Sarah, go ahead. I thought you were telling us that we have 5 minutes.
We have 6 minutes.
You have 6, okay.
So I had a question, and this is kind of like a big philosophical question that I think about a lot since we're getting to the end of the day. But as educators and responsible citizens of the world, I guess we can just think about this all broadly. Do any of you feel like green chemistry and basically using the reconstruction of chemical curriculum from our preconceived notions that we've had for a long time is also a good framework for thinking about broad system changes as a response to the climate crisis as a total, and like helping your students maybe take chemistry and changing a field, and how do we take these principles, right, to change how we've done one embedded thing,
thinking about,
but then apply that to all these other challenges we're facing more broadly as the world. Do you have any idea of like, if you have thought of that? Do you have thoughts on that? Like, this is what I sit up at night thinking about, and you're all just really working in a great space. So I'm curious what your thoughts
are. I think what I call it would be trade-offs, perhaps, of how we manage the trade-offs. I think, but I'm encouraged in the sense of what I'm seeing now, particularly now that I'm working more in the
space of integrating these different informations. We talked about like just getting this information. Information is there. I mean, obviously we can always use more data. I'm a scientist. Yes, give me all the data. But particularly working in the safer chemical selection space, you're not always going to have the information that you want to have. But there's a lot of opportunity with AI, and I'm an AI pragmatist, I guess. When used properly, there's a lot of opportunities to guide folks into those more holistic decisions. And I've been thinking about conversations about how to better communicate this data that's coming across the supply chain, thanks to all these other initiatives, particularly these days related to like mandatory reporting and that sort of thing, and saying, we have this potentially safer chemical reduction in toxicity here, but our greenhouse gas footprint goes up.
Thinking about
and what do we do? So, and like, yeah, then the reduction in toxicity would be great, but now we have to think about the impacts with regards to greenhouse gas emission. And just the idea that we're having this conversation now, like I'm very encouraged. And I get people who come to me and because I'm promote alternative assessment principles, which talks about, making these holistic decisions, thinking about cost, performance, all these other things. And they're like, oh, you make it sound so easy. I'm like, well, no, it's not easy, but it's getting easier. And these days, especially from when I started, 15, 20 years ago, there was a tool deficit. There was a methodology deficit. But these days, I'm not really seeing that. Now it's really more like, how do I operationalize this? How do I make decisions based on this information? So I don't know if it answers your question, but this is my perspective. Yes.
I think I have a sort of philosophical approach to your philosophical question. One thing I know we try really hard to do with our students, especially older undergrads, and our research grad students is like some metacognition, right? Like you're going to be problem solvers when you leave here. You might be a chemist, chemical engineer, you might be a mechanical engineer. And your degree gave you the certain tools that you'll use to solve certain kinds of problems, but it's the practice of that through school and beyond that makes you a problem solver. And so, we'll talk to the students about, okay, if you can do an engineering alternatives analysis, then you can do an economic assessment and in comparison, right, of alternatives in a similar way. So, we try to point out to them that the tools and the training that you get are readily able to be carried over to solve different kinds of problems. So we hope that they're able to do that because we can't predict all of the problems that they're going to face in their future careers. We can only show them how to use tools to solve problems.
I want to actually riff a little bit off of one of the words you used earlier about metacognition or thinking about thinking in response to your question. There becomes a conversation about the idea of sustainable practices versus imagination. We're in a state of mind where we're dealing with these problems, and again, the philosophical answer, we're dealing with these problems in the context of global issues and global solutions, and it is very much paramount that the answers have to come from both the students who are coming up as the ground level now and industry professionals making the demand for the product and supply and demand. The space has to exist, and this is one of the spaces, the space has to exist where an individual has a chance to find the best wrong answer and be able to find the process that will lead to a new and innovative solution, if not the right solution.
Thinking about...
And that type of opportunity is not afforded to many students in many different communities and many different forums. So at the very least, as you alluded to before, the fact that the conversation is even addressed at this moment is a step in the right direction. And one of the things we talk about in pedagogy is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And so in this context, if the students and if the professionals are making choices to make a better reagent, make a better process, make a better outcome, it will at least be better than it was yesterday, and tomorrow we can do it again.
All right. Well, I love these. I love ending, this session with such a deep and passionate answers because they were really positive as well. So thank you, panelists. Can we give the panelists a round of applause? So, and now I'm going to pass it on to Sarah, who's going to tell us what we're doing next.
Thank you, Omar, again for being a great moderator. Your afternoon breakout sessions are very exciting. There's a wonderful hands-on K through 12 activity that our amazing teachers are leading. And I'm really sad I can't participate actually, because I want to do one at one point, but it looks very exciting. So that's if you're feeling like active, like you're like, I want to move around. And then we have Ask Me Anything with John, and I'm going to help him kind of field questions, but that should be a very fun, lively discussion. And last but not least, Julian Silverman and Cynthia Smith are going to talk about K through 12 and higher ed collaborations, which I'm also really bummed that I can't go and listen to, because they had some really, really cool ideas on stuff they've been doing to engage students.